Chapter 711 Myriad Phenomenon City. Chapter 711 Myriad Phenomenon City. Of course, there were many indications that showed that even with the bloodline of the god race in her, Nian Qi's background might be even more complicated. There was naturally a reason why the primordial 9 races ruled over the 10,000 races back in the primordial era. If not for the battle royale in the primordial era which reduced the 10,000 races and caused immense damage to the strength of the primordial 9 races, humans wouldn't have been able to overthrow the rule of the primordial 9 races even if they had immense fortune and multiple emperors. The ancestral dragon that appeared more than 10,000 years ago had frightening strength. 2 super sects and an empire was annihilated because of it. After the ancient war, the 9 races fell and humans ruled over Tianhuang mainland. Even so, there were 9 forbidden grounds for cultivators on Tianhuang mainland. The 9 forbidden grounds were the places where the primordial 9 races resided. Any living being apart from those of the primordial 9 races would be killed mercilessly if they entered the forbidden grounds. Previously, the Palace Lord of Blood Crow Palace arrived at the Dragon Bone Valley and alarmed a divine dragon. The reason why the Palace Lord explained hurriedly that he was one of the 9 races was so that he could save himself. Unfortunately, the divine dragon could tell with a single look that the Palace Lord's bloodline was impure and almost killed him on the spot. After a while, Little Fatty and the others swept through the battlefield and reaped their rewards. "Boss, where should we go next?" "I'll go along with you," Little Fatty said. Su Zimo replied deeply, "We'll find a place to rest for the day. Tomorrow we'll head for Myriad Phenomenon City." "All right." Everyone nodded. If they wanted to search for the god race aimlessly in the ancient battlefield, it would be akin to seeking a pin in a haystack. It was unrealistic. There was definitely a reason why the god race appeared in the ancient battlefield. They merely discovered Nian Qi by accident. The place where the god race had the highest possibility of appearing was at the center of the ancient battlefield, Myriad Phenomenon City. Myriad Phenomenon City existed for a long time and had been around since the ancient era. Fairy Ling Long named the ancient city and it represented endless phenomenons. She hoped that humans would be able to create golden core phenomenons limitlessly in the future. Right now, even if there weren't 10,000, there were several thousand different golden core phenomenons. However, there were not many that could be ranked at the top of the phenomenon ranking. Most of them were familiar ones that had been passed down from the ancient era. This day, a group of strange, travel-worn cultivators arrived outside Myriad Phenomenon City. To be precise, there were only 3 cultivators in the group. The other 5 cultivators gave off a faint demonic chi and showed clear signs of being demon beasts. Although demon beasts could take on human form after creating a core and even speak in human tongue, they could not erase their demon beast roots entirely. After creating an essence spirit, demon beasts can resonate with the universe and absorb the essence of the sun and moon, allowing them to take on human form completely while hiding their auras so that they can hide among humans. Those demon beasts were difficult to detect and that was the reason why they were called fiend demons. Among the 5 demon beasts, 3 of them looked menacing and had burly bodies filled with long fur. Their gazes were vicious and they emanated a rich demonic chi. The other 2 were female. One of them was tall with long slender legs that looked extremely flexible. The other one was in her prime and had peerless looks. She wore fiery red robes that were daring and barely concealed her body. Every single blink of her huge, watery eyes seemed as though they could steal someone's soul. As the group of them walked, the young lady in her prime drew away half of everyone's attention alone. The reason why the group of them was described as strange was not because of the 5 demons or the young lady with the charming looks alone. In the ancient battlefield, many disciples or strong paragons of different sects had their own mounts or spirit beasts. It was a part of their combat strength. Previously, there were even cultivators that rode on 7 WIRMS into Myriad Phenomenon City and emanated an exceptional aura. 5 demon beasts was nothing compared to that. WIRMS were pure-blooded ferocious beasts and looked way stronger than the 5 demon beasts. There was even a female cultivator with an unmatched grace who rode on a snow bird and descended into Myriad Phenomenon City. There were spirit chariots that flew through the air as well where men could be faintly seen lying on the laps of beautiful women while enjoying wine and making merry. The spirit chariots were followed by many gorgeous women and flower petals were scattered everywhere they passed with an aromatic fragrance that others envied. In terms of grandeur, this group of people were nothing. However, the truly odd thing about the group of them was the attitude between the 3 cultivators and the 5 demons. All of them conversed happily and rather than slaves they seemed like good friends. Hmm? Finally, someone exclaimed softly and sized up a green-robed cultivator among them before murmuring with a puzzled expression, "Could he be?" Zimo and the others had finally arrived here after an arduous journey. Myriad Phenomenon City was like an ancient gigantic beast that sat here motionlessly, giving off an antiquated aura as it witnessed history pass by. Beneath Myriad Phenomenon City, everyone raised their heads. The tiles on the city walls were greenish-black with marks left behind by sharp swords, as though they were telling a story. "How tall?" Little Fox exclaimed. The group of them were akin to insignificant ants beneath the walls of the ancient city. "This ancient city sure is grand." Ching Ching could not help but exclaim as well. The spirit tiger shifted his eyes and gazed at the entrance of Myriad Phenomenon City, pouting his lips. "It's a pity that there's no gates to this ancient city. Its defenses are too weak. If a beast stampede arrives, the city will be infiltrated instantly." "You're mistaken." Zimo smiled and shook his head. "There's no need for city gates in Myriad Phenomenon City. Given the treacherous environment of the ancient battlefield, the only ancient city that did not require a city gate was Myriad Phenomenon City." "Ah!" The spirit tiger froze for a moment in confusion. Zimo pointed beneath his feet and said slowly, "The most outstanding cultivators of the Golden Core realm in Tianhuang mainland are all gathered here in this city. Of the hundreds of thousands of cultivators who entered the ancient battlefield, at least 100,000 of them will make it to Myriad Phenomenon City. With that figure, no demon beast stampede or any living being would dare to attack Myriad Phenomenon City. That would be akin to having a death wish." Ching Ching kicked the spirit tiger and teased, "Hey, go and trigger a beast stampede. I'll see how you take down Myriad Phenomenon City." The spirit tiger coughed twice hurriedly with an awkward expression. Suddenly, a voice sounded above the city walls that caused a commotion. "Zimo. Is Zimo." "Huh? What are you talking about?" "The monster incarnate who obtained the legacy of the human emperor's palace, has a double phenomenon, destroyed Glass Palace's ancient city and defeated Su Qing?" "I'm definitely not mistaken, it's him. It truly looks like him. Green robes and accompanied by the legacy disciples of Tomb Sect and Puppet Sect. There will definitely be a good show to watch. I heard that there are many people in the city that have their eyes set on killing him. Hee, they should be eyeing his treasures instead, right?" Above the city walls, on both sides of the pathways and within buildings, countless gazes looked down. Some of them were in awe, some were envious, some hostile. But more than that, most of them were gloating. Chapter 712 Spirit Beast Spar. Chapter 712, Spirit Beast Spar. Who wouldn't know of Zimo? In the ancient battlefield, there might not be many who have seen Zimo in person before. However, there was barely anyone who had not heard of him before. Right now, Zimo was already a scary figure that no one dared to approach, and he was second only to Dean. The moment he stepped foot into Myriad Phenomenon City, a commotion broke out. Zimo was calm and nonchalant despite the numerous gazes. Little Fatty and Shurjian were comparatively flustered. The people who could survive endless dangers and make the arduous journey to Myriad Phenomenon City were far from ordinary. There were hundreds of thousands of cultivators who entered the ancient battlefield. However, only 100,000 or so could make it to Myriad Phenomenon City alive. The gazes from these people naturally carried an immense pressure that ordinary cultivators would not be able to endure. Ching Ching frowned slightly. Instinctively, Little Fox hid behind Zimo. The golden lion had a grim expression and tried his best to retract his demonic chi. No matter what, they were demon beasts. It was natural for them to feel uneasy being sized up by so many paragons of the human race. The spirit tiger ignored all the surrounding gazes and swaggered his way into the city boldly. Although Monkey could sense the hostility, he had no fear or reservations. Instead, he snarled and glared back with a menacing expression. He had a proud nature, and apart from Zimo, whom he was on friendly terms with, he did not have any regard for anyone else. "That demon monkey sure is cocky. Forget it, we had better not mess with it since it was probably brought here by the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island." "Humph, let's see how long more that Zimo can continue smiling. He's already made enemies with so many people before the fight for the Golden Core Phenomenon ranking. There will definitely be people who want to cause trouble for him." The crowd discussed. Right then, a group of cultivators walked over, and everywhere they passed, the crowd made a path for them. Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. There were dozens of them in the group and they came from 3 different sects, wearing different attires and had varied sect badges. Among them, there were even cultivators that were transformed from spirit beasts. Su Zimo had seen one of their sect badges on Su Qing before. Zephyr Thunder Palace. There were many cultivators of Zephyr Thunder Palace that died outside the Astral Dragon Sputum Lair, and Su Qing escaped with grave injuries after barely scraping through death. The arrival of this group was definitely hostile. The other 2 groups of cultivators were from Purple Firmament Sect and Clear Wind Temple. There were 3 super sects gathered. Fufu, what did I say? A tall tree is susceptible to being knocked over by strong winds. Su Zimo is bound to die after offending so many factions. I don't think anything much is going to happen since killing is forbidden within the city. Those cultivators can't possibly just start a fight on the streets. Wait and see, humph. Many cultivators were waiting to watch a spectacle. Su Zimo stopped in his tracks and narrowed his gaze as he looked at the dozens of people approaching. Fufu. The Golden Core leading Clear Wine Temple laughed gently before he arrived as he cupped his fists and raised his voice. I am Duan Qingping. It's a pleasure, fellow Taoist Su, I've heard a lot about you. The Golden Core named Duan Qingping gave a fake smile and his words were merely pleasantries. The Golden Core leading Purple Firmament Sect sized up Su Zimo from head to toe before nodding expressionlessly. I am Wu Feng. It's the 2 of them. Things sure are heating up. Both Duan Qingping and Wu Feng are the top disciples of the 2 super sects. The cultivators of Zephyr Thunder Palace had cold gazes that were filled with killing intent. Su Zimo was not even bothered to put on a facade of politeness towards the group of them and had remained in silence with an icy gaze right from the beginning. Monkey and the others glared opposite with extreme hostility. Fufu. Duan Qingping chuckled and waved it off gently. Fellow Taoists, there's no need to be nervous. Fighting or killing is forbidden in the city apart from the Myriad Phenomenon Hall. Why are you guys so tensed up? Relax, relax. Su Zimo remained silent. He had no doubt that killing was forbidden in the city. After all, if there wasn't such a rule, all the paragons that were gathered in Myriad Phenomenon City might fight over any disagreements given their haughty and prideful natures. At that time, most people would be dead and there would be rivers of blood before the fight for the Golden Core Phenomenon ranking. Even so, Duan Qingping and the others must have a motive for coming here. Duan Qingping maintained his smile and swept his gaze across Monkey, the Spirit Tiger and everyone else before continuing. However, there's no restrictions about killing demon beasts in the city. Su Zimo raised his brow and his face was filled with killing intent. This group of people were here because they wanted to make a move on Monkey and the others. They were already sworn siblings. None of them was a spirit beast of anyone. To Su Zimo, Monkey and the others were like his kin. Anyone that harbored designs on his kin had to die. Duan Qingping chuckled again after sensing Su Zimo's killing intent. Fellow Taoist Su, don't get worked up. As cultivators, there's naturally no way we will lay our hands on your spirit beasts. However, he changed the topic. It's inconvenient for us to fight lest we spoil our relationship, but we can let our demon beasts spar with one another. How about that? With that, Duan Qingping slanted slightly and a tall man walked out from behind him. The man emanated a rich demonic chi and had a savage gaze. He was muscular with a bare upper body that was lined with steel-like muscles. He looked extremely terrifying. Duan Qingping remarked casually, "This is a spirit beast that was hatched from a spirit beast egg I found by wandering into a cave abode by accident in the past. It's nothing special." A gorgeous woman from Purple Firmament Sect at the side walked forward. She had a long, slender body that curved in the right places charmingly. Wu Feng pointed to the woman. "This is a spirit beast reared by me. She's a demon beast of the snake race and is extremely ordinary as well. Your spirit beasts can pick any of them as an opponent for a spar." Su Zimo sneered internally. Neither Monkey nor the spirit tiger were spirit beasts reared by him. As such, a spar like this was naturally extremely amusing to him. Just as Su Zimo was about to decline, a hairy palm appeared on his shoulder. Monkey stood out and rubbed his palms with a grin. "I've been feeling itchy anyways, I'll fight them." Since Monkey made his decision, Su Zimo did not stop the former. A look of delight flickered through the depths of Duan Qingping and Wu Feng's eyes. Duan Qingping asked with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, which of these 2 ferocious beasts do you want to challenge?" What's with the hassle? Let the both of them come together." Monkey spat in disdain and shouted, "You have a death wish. The mighty man's expression darkened instantly and the demonic chi surrounding him grew thicker. Hoo hoo hoo. The snake woman was completely amused, but her eyes were colder than anything else as she said frostily, "Demon monkey, don't regret this." Chapter 7:13, Two Great Ferocious Beasts. Chapter 7:13, Two Great Ferocious Beasts. As though he was afraid that Su Zimo might regret things, Duan Qingping said hurriedly, "Since that's the case, we'll let them spar." Although he said it was a spar, everyone could tell that once the spirit beasts on both sides started fighting, blood would be spilled and no mercy would be shown. Duan Qingping and Wu Feng exchanged glances. Both could see the delight on the face of the other. Earlier on, they pretended to be weak intentionally by claiming that their spirit beasts were ordinary. To think that Su Zimo would be fooled with such ease. Duan Qingping sneered internally, although this monster incarnate has quite a reputation, he's probably nothing much. Even that spirit monkey reared by him is so impetuous like a moron. Duan Qingping and Wu Feng had relaxed expressions, convinced of their victory. On the other side, Su Zimo had a calm expression and his gaze was deep as the ocean. No one could read his mind. Little Fatty and Shi Jian had odd looks on their faces. Both of them had witnessed monkey strength personally previously. Although that demon monkey seemed like its bloodline was ordinary, it was definitely not inferior to ferocious beasts in combat strength. The golden lion had a frozen expression as he tried his best to look worried. Ching Ching and Little Fox tried their best to hide their amusement. The spirit tiger grinned evilly, looking as the mighty man and snake woman as though he was looking at two corpses. They had a better understanding of monkey. If the mysterious power in monkey's bloodline was forced out and it entered a berserk state, a calamity would definitely unfold. At that time, monkey would not be able to recognize and would attack anyone even if it was Su Zimo. Before long, a space opened up on the long street. The number of cultivators gathered increased and a crowd was formed. Monkey had already entered the battlefield and was twisting his neck to stretch. The mighty man and snake woman formed a triangle opposite him. With a mocking expression, the mighty man said slowly, "Demon monkey, it's not too late for you to regret now." Regret? Monkey rolled his eyes and sprinted towards the mighty man in huge strides while cursing, "Regret your mother." Boom. He guarded his chest with his left hand and his right hand expanded as he threw a punch with it. The size of his fist grew and resembled a gigantic greenish-black seal that descended from the skies. The tremendous force caused the air to explode with a boom. Sanguine Ape Fist Seal. That was a killing move from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Apart from Su Zimo, Monkey was the only one who knew that. Ah. The mighty man was about to refute when he swallowed his words out of fear towards the frightening incoming force. In fact, there was even a stench of blood around the gigantic seal. Pust. Recognizing how powerful this attack was, the mighty man gasped and his expression changed. Crackle. The tendons and bones in the mighty man's body rang at the same time and his blood chi surged. He reverted to his true form without hesitation after Monkey's attack. Although demons could take on human form after forming a core, their full combat strength could only be unleashed in their true forms. A gigantic demon beast appeared where he was. It resembled a tiger and a pair of wings appeared on its back with a swoosh. It had sharp teeth and fangs as it glared menacingly with a torrential ferocity. Ah. It's a Cheong Chi. The Cheong Chi is one of the 4 great ancient ferocious beasts. It's almost impossible to capture one alive and tame it thereafter. Duan Qingping sure is lucky. Any paragon that could become a top disciple of a super sect would definitely have his own opportunities and encounters. Duan Qingping sure is scheming to hide the identity of his spirit beast. Seems like that demon monkey is doomed. On the other side, the snake woman seemed to have sensed the immense pressure and reverted to her true form as well. A gigantic snake coiled up from the ground and it was 1,000 foot long. The scales on its body were as large as a person's face. Its head could almost reach the heavens as it flicked its forked tongue while glaring at Monkey coldly. Its gigantic snake tail swayed with a nauseating stench. Its tail was filled with poison. The cultivators in the vicinity held their breaths hurriedly. Everyone was even more shocked when they turned to look over. The snake's tail was forked like a pair of hooks that shimmered coldly as though they could pierce anything in the world. Heavens, it's a hook snake. Yet another pure-blooded ferocious beast. Duan Qingping and Wu Feng came prepared. Su Zimo's demon beast is bound to die. Even in the ancient battlefield, pure-blooded ferocious beasts were rarely seen. Even if they were seen, it was almost impossible to capture them alive and force them into a blood oath. But now, an ordinary monkey was fighting against two pure-blooded ferocious beasts. Wouldn't the monkey be ripped apart alive? Bang! Monkey had already arrived in front of the Qiongqi and the gigantic seal descended fiercely. The Qiongqi raised his arms to defend head-on and his blood qi surged in a torrential manner as a dull thud of defeat echoed out. There was a momentary pause. The next moment the crowd went into an uproar. Right in front of countless gazes, the massive body of the Qiongqi was sent flying and fell onto the ground, rolling on the long street for a long time before coming to a stop. It was knocked away by a seemingly ordinary demon beast. How powerful was that burst power? What was the background of that demon monkey such that it was able to send the Qiongqi, one of the four great ancient ferocious beasts, flying? Bust, bust, bust. An evil gust of wind welcomed him. The gigantic tail of the snake swept over like a heavenly piercing pillar. It had a frightening might as sand and gravel flew before it even arrived. Monkey did not move at all and channeled his blood qi. Reaching out, he opened his palms and grabbed the incoming snake tail directly. Bang! The stone slabs beneath Monkey's feet exploded instantly. However, Monkey did not move at all against the full-powered attack of the hook snake. A cold glint flashed through the eyes of the hook snake. The sweep of her tail was only her first move. Her true killing move came from her snake hooks thereafter. The reason why they were called hook snakes was because their most frightening means were the hooks on their tails. The pair of hooks was incomparably sharp and when cultivated to the peak, they could even penetrate perfect spirit weapons. Not only that, the hooks contained toxic poison. Most living beings would explode into pus within 10 breaths if they were struck by the hooks. The snake tail swept over like a stone pillar and steel whip. However, after Monkey grabbed it with both hands, the snake's tail went limp. As though it had a life of its own, it moved unusually and thrust towards Monkey's legs. Monkey could not dodge in time and two bloodied holes appeared on his legs. The hook snake smiled. In her eyes, Monkey was already a dead man. Even a pure-blooded ferocious beast could only endure slightly longer against the spread of the toxic poison, but they would also die sooner or later. Monkey's expression did not change, but his knees buckled and he almost fell over. However, the blood glint in his eyes intensified and he stood up immediately after while his body expanded as he roared into the skies. That attack had enraged Monkey thoroughly. Chapter 7:14, How Bitter This Sucks. Chapter 7:14, How Bitter This Sucks. The inner core in Monkey's chest circulated fanatically and his blood qi surged. Instantly, he reverted to his true form with an expanded body and a torrential ferocity. Roar! Monkey glared with his bloodshot eyes and let out a deafening scream. Ah! Many cultivators watching in the vicinity exclaimed and their expressions changed. Some of the cultivators had it even worse and even retreated a few steps by instinct against the mighty of the demonic qi. Monkey grabbed the hook snake's tail with both arms and dug into its flesh with 10 forceful fingers. When he exerted strength in his arms, his muscles bulged and looked like defined rocks. PSST. The hook snake hissed into the air in turmoil. With a godly might, Monkey lifted the gigantic snake from its tail and swung it through the air with a massive arc before smashing it onto the ground violently. There were shouts and the crowd had already dispersed. The cultivators in the city were extremely alert and had retreated the moment they sensed that something was amiss. Boom. Accompanied by a deafening explosion, the hook snake's body smashed heavily onto the ground and created a fissure that was 1,000 feet long. Sand and gravel flew everywhere along with flesh and blood. All the cultivators who were watching in the vicinity winced with immense shock in their eyes. It was too ruthless. If they were in the hook snake's position, they would have been smashed into sludge by that attack. The hook snake convulsed on the ground as she let out a stuttering, tragic sound with injuries all over her body. Although she was a pure-blooded ferocious beast, she could not withstand Monkey's frightening attack. She had truly not expected Monkey to turn even more fearsome and produce such a shocking power after he was struck by her poison. Monkey panted slightly. In truth, the poison of the hook snake was rather lethal and had already entered his body. However, the poison triggered the mysterious power in his bloodline and the two different powers ate at one another. Neither side could overwhelm the other within a short period of time, and that stalemate was the reason why he had not fallen. Even the conniving Duan Qingping could no longer smile. Wu Feng's expression was even darker. On the other side, the Jianghu was sent flying far away by Monkey's punch. Its bones were nearly broken as it struggled to stand up. Swoosh! The Jianghu spread its wings and descended from the skies, lunging towards Monkey viciously. Clang! Clang! It reached out with extremely sharp claws that shimmered coldly towards Monkey's head. At the same time, the Jianghu reared its head and opened its mouth to reveal fangs one sharper than the other to chomp down on Monkey's neck. Monkey would be doomed no matter if he was scratched or bitten by the Jianghu. Standing motionlessly on the spot, Monkey reared his head and glared with his bloodshot eyes. He did not dodge or avoid and suddenly counterattacked fiercely. Crack, crack, crack. Monkey reached out with both arms. The sound of bones cracking and tendons twitching could be heard loudly from his muscular arms. Right in front of countless gazes, the tendons of the two arms stretched and their flesh were filled with blood, expanding more than 3 feet instantly. Although the Jianghu had the initiative, the sudden change caused it to be in a passive position. Before its fangs could reach Monkey, the latter's arms were already extended close to it. The Jianghu changed tactics at the last minute and grabbed Monkey's arms with its palms while biting down towards the latter's approaching palm. Bang! Monkey managed to grab the Jianghu's jaws before the latter could bite down. Boom! Monkey's bloodshot eyes shone brightly as he howled in rage, yanking the Jianghu down from midair and smashing it onto the ground violently. That smash caused the Jianghu's head to spin and it felt like its bones were about to break. Its skin had already split apart and it was on the verge of fainting from the pain. Its situation was not much better than the hook snake. Before it could react, a foot stomped down on its lower body with a thunderous might. The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Groar! The Jianghu shrieked in pain. Monkey stomped down on the Jianghu's lower body with one foot while grabbing its upper and lower jaws with both arms. He had a feral gaze as he smashed them towards his own knee. Snap! The tragic shriek came to a stop. The Jianghu's upper and lower jaws were ripped apart by Monkey and its brains were smashed into sludge. It could not be any more dead. The cultivators watching were dumbfounded. This was an outcome that nobody had expected. The Jianghu was one of the 4 great ancient ferocious beasts. Even in the ancient era, it dominated the forests and was a superior demon beast. Who would have thought that it would be killed by a seemingly ordinary demon monkey? Su Zimo was unsurprised and had a calm expression. Apart from him and Night Spirit, Monkey had the most frightening combat strength among the 7 of them sworn siblings. Although the 2 pure-blooded ferocious beasts had powerful backgrounds, they were no match for Monkey. At the thought of Night Spirit, a black shadow that resembled a phantom lined with cold scales and had a sharp tail flashed through Su Zimo's mind. Night Spirit was a natural killer. Each time he attacked, Su Zimo would always be amazed. His kills were clean without any unnecessary actions. If Night Spirit was the one fighting this, the 2 pure-blooded ferocious beasts would have been carcasses within a couple of moves. Duan Qingping's expression turned dark but reverted to normal within a moment. Initially, they wanted to kill Su Zimo's spirit beast with this Spar and conveniently agitate the latter. As long as Su Zimo was agitated and attacked within Myriad Phenomenon City, the nascent souls backing them would have sufficient reason to attack and kill Su Zimo on the streets. However, they've miscalculated. Snake Woman, come back. Wu Feng shouted hurriedly when he realized that the battle was already lost. He did not want his spirit beast to end up in the same state as the Jianghu. The hook snake obeyed and was invigorated for a moment, slithering her body towards the direction of Wu Feng. Trying to flee? Monkey sneered and stomped on the ground. Instantly, his body flashed and he dashed over at an extremely fast speed. Bang! Stomping down on the hook snake's waist, Monkey exerted strength in his foot and almost split the hook snake's body into 2. The hook snake shrieked shrilly and twisted her body wildly, yet she could not break free from Monkey's grip no matter what she did. Before Wu Feng could react, Monkey had already leaned forward and hammered down his massive fists in a flurry. Bang! 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 He attacked 12 times in succession. The hook snake's head was smashed into a pulp. The hook snake had fallen. The battered half of the snake's body that remained twitched unconsciously. Ha ha! Monkey grinned and sliced open the snake's body, retrieving a slimy green gall. He raised his head and swallowed it as he smacked his lips. Spat. He spat out and pouted his lips. How bitter this sucks. The cultivators in the vicinity were speechless. The gall of a hook snake was the most valuable part of its body and was worth even more than its inner core. After consumption, cultivators gain immunity to most poison and can even dispel the poison of the hook snake itself. A single drop of juice from the hook snake's gallbladder was sufficient to refine a superior class antidote. To think that this demon monkey would be unsatisfied after consuming the entire gallbladder, and it was even filled with contempt. Chapter 7:15 Snowdrift Valley. Chapter 7:15 Snowdrift Valley. Accursed beast, how dare you! Wu Feng had finally snapped out of his stupor and his expression was extremely grim. He glared at Monkey with a deep killing intent and released his golden core's spirit energy while summoning a flying sword. Su Zimo's gaze turned cold. As long as Wu Feng dared to move, he would attack and crush this man to death with his palm. Wu Feng's aura had barely surged when he shuddered. Su Zimo's hands were tainted with the blood of many paragons. A single gaze from him carried an overbearing aura and a terrifying suppression. Brother Wu. Duan Qingping was the first to react as he held Wu Feng back by the arm and shook his head gently. The killing intent in Wu Feng's eyes dissipated. He took a deep breath before calming down and retracted his flying sword. Humph. Monkey glanced at the two of them from the corner of his eyes before snorting and returning to Su Zimo's side. This was almost a perfect victory for him. Although he was injured as well, those were external injuries and his bones and tendons were unaffected. After he swallowed the snake gall, the greatest threat to him, the hook snake poison, was already dispelled. Duan Qingping cupped his fists from far away and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Su, to think that not only are you strong, even your spirit beast is so terrifying. I'm impressed." Su Zimo frowned. The fact that Duan Qingping was able to smile despite the immense losses meant that he was plotting something much greater. Duan Qingping smiled. "Fellow Taoist Su, the reason why we're here is actually to invite you for a banquet." Here it comes. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. This was probably their true motive. Duan Qingping continued, "The elders of our three immortal sects have heard of your reputation for a long time as well. They've prepared a banquet specially for you and we'd like to invite you for a gathering." Needless to think, this was definitely a Hongmen banquet of no return. Su Cheng of Zephyr Thunder Palace was nearly killed by Su Zimo. The Purple Thunder Manual was in his possession as well. How could Zephyr Thunder Palace be so kind as to invite him for a banquet? The battle beneath the Human Emperor's palace 20 years ago shocked the world. Successors of the immortal, Buddhist and Fiend sects were left dead and injured. The successors of two major immortal sects, Purple Firmament Sect and Clear Wind Temple, died in Su Zimo's hands. In other words, the three major immortal sects before them, Zephyr Thunder Palace, Purple Firmament Sect and Clear Wind Temple, all had grudges with Su Zimo in one way or another. It was easy for him to attend the banquet, but he would most likely be left with no choice after attending. Naturally, there was no way Su Zimo would be deceived by a plot as such. He sneered internally and was about to decline when Duan Qingping gave a sudden smile and said slowly, "This is the goodwill of the elders of our three major immortal sections. I'm sure you will give them some face, right, fellow Taoist Su?" Su Zimo's expression changed slightly. He felt the chills run down his spine after Duan Qingping finished speaking and he was alarmed internally as a cold killing intent engulfed him. At least 3 killing intents were fixed on him at that instant. Su Zimo finally understood the meaning behind the invitation. There was no doubt that it was a Hongmen banquet. However, the invitation came from the nascent soul-perfected lords of the three major immortal sects. If he declined right away, it would be equivalent to disrespect towards the three nascent souls. The nascent souls of the three major immortal sects would have a reason to attack him. Private duels were forbidden in Myriad Phenomenon City. However, those restrictions meant little to the nascent souls. They could make a move as long as they had a reason to justify it. There were many seals in Myriad Phenomenon City that could prevent the detection from the outside world, and it was like a pocket dimension of its own. Even if the nascent souls attacked with their full powers, they would not cause dimensional tears. The nascent souls in Myriad Phenomenon City were not sealers in their twilight years. These were also no ordinary nascent souls. They were perfected lords of various super sects and came from the immortal sects. These were people with countless trump cards and terrifying means available to them. Naturally, at the end of the day, it was because Su Zimo did not have any powerful backing or the support of nascent souls. He remained silent as his mind surged rapidly, considering the pros and cons of his options. At that moment, a single wrong statement from him could bring about attacks from nascent souls. What a savage scheme. They're not leaving Su Zimo any way out at all. That's right, he's doomed whether he accepts or refuses the invitation. The crowd had gone silent as well, and only a few cultivators were left whispering. "Are you attending or not? Hurry and reply." Wu Feng hollered impatiently. His killing intent had already reached its peak after the death of the hook snake that he had reared for many years. Duan Qingping gave a cold smile as well. "Fellow Taoist Su, aren't you someone that's decisive to kill? Why have you gone so cowardly such that you don't even dare to accept an invitation?" "It's not because he doesn't dare to." At that moment, a woman's voice sounded from outside the crowd. Immediately after, dozens of female cultivators passed through the crowd briskly, and the temperature on the long streets dipped. The cultivators wore snow-white robes that were spotless, and each of them had extraordinary features. Graceful and elegant, the only thing was that their expressions were cold as ice. Cultivators of Snowdrift Valley. What are they doing here? Could they be here to take revenge on Su Zimo as well? Many cultivators discussed softly. Su Zimo swept his gaze across. The leader of the group of Snowdrift Valley female cultivators looked familiar. Running through his memories, Su Zimo recalled that person before long. Under the Human Emperor's palace, there was a cultivator from Snowdrift Valley that attacked him as well. It was this female cultivator, and her name seemed to be Ling Han. Duan Qingping frowned slightly and cupped his fists before asking with a raised voice, "What did you mean by that, fellow Taoist Ling Han?" Ling Han walked closer with her group of cultivators before nodding to Su Zimo. She then turned to Duan Qingping and Wu Feng and replied indifferently, "It's not because fellow Taoist Su does not dare to accept your invitation, it's because he has accepted Snowdrift Valley's invitation to a banquet earlier on. You guys are too late." A look of surprise flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. He had not seen any cultivators of Snowdrift Valley after entering the ancient battlefield, much less agree to attend a banquet of theirs. However, Su Zimo did not expose her and merely stood silently at the side as he watched. He had a vague feeling that Snowdrift Valley was not here for revenge but to save him. Duan Qingping frowned. "Ling Han, what's the meaning of this? The nascent souls of our three major immortal sects have invited him personally. What's your business being here?" "Humph." Ling Han sneered coldly, "There's an order to things. So what if you guys are from the immortal sects? Snowdrift Valley is part of the immortal sects as well. Furthermore, this is the wish of our elder, perfected Lord Luo Shui." There was an obvious shift in Duan Qingping and Wu Feng's expressions at the mention of perfected Lord Luo Shui. A hint of cautiousness and fear could be seen from the depths of their eyes. At the same time, Su Zimo could vaguely sense with his spirit perception that another aura had appeared in the voids. It was extremely chilling and protected Su Zimo's group, facing the other three murderous auras in a standoff. This aura was the spirit consciousness that only nascent souls possessed. The three auras previously should have been from nascent souls of Zephyr Thunder Palace, Purple Firmament Sect and Clear Wind Temple. The aura that came later on was from perfected Lord Luo Shui. Chapter 716, Perfected Lord Luo Shui. Chapter 716, Perfected Lord Luo Shui. The situation turned tense for a brief moment with the inclusion of Snowdrift Valley. Duan Qingping and the others did not dare to behave recklessly after Ling Han brought out the name of Perfected Lord Luo Shui. Perfected Lord Luo Shui was a top cultivator of the nascent soul with frightening strength. In fact, she had a shot at becoming this generation's titular disciple of Snowdrift Valley. Even the nascent souls backing Duan Qingping and the others were cautious towards dealing with Perfected Lord Luo Shui. The four terrifying auras engaged in a standoff in midair for a long time before dissipating gradually. Thereafter, the expressions of Duan Qingping and the others changed, as though they had obtained instructions. Wu Feng was indignant as he gripped his fists and glared at Su Zimo and Monkey before harumphing. After a moment of silence, Duan Qingping said with cupped fists, "Since that's the case, we won't insist on it. However, I've got to remind you, fellow Taoist Su, there are many people who harbor intentions towards you in Myriad Phenomenon City. You've got to watch out." Although Duan Qingping did not pinpoint anyone, he was clearly referring to Snowdrift Valley. "Duan Qingping, what are you implying?" Ling Han hollered with a cold gaze, "If you have anything on your mind, say it. Don't beat around the bush." "Ha, I didn't mention who those people were." Why are you getting worked up, fellow Taoist Ling Han? Duan Qingping chuckled softly and turned to leave with everyone from Clear Wind Temple without saying anything more. The cultivators of Zephyr Thunder Palace and Purple Firmament sect followed soon after. Ling Han turned to Su Zimo and asked softly with an inquiring look, "Fellow Taoist Su, follow me?" "All right." This time round, Su Zimo nodded without hesitation. He could naturally tell that Duan Qingping was trying to sow discord between them. At the same time, he did not have any deep feud with Snowdrift Valley. The only thing that struck out was that Ling Han was injured by Su Zimo beneath the Human Emperor's palace 20 years ago. The crowd that was spectating dispersed as Su Zimo's group departed. However, everyone was clear that there would definitely be no peace in Myriad Phenomenon City from this day forth. The entire journey was silent. Under Ling Han's lead, Su Zimo's group arrived at Snowdrift Valley's residence before long. The area occupied by the residence was extremely huge, and a snowy field with a freezing temperature could be seen immediately upon crossing the gates. There were crystal snowflakes falling from the skies. Beneath their feet was white snow that crunched with every single step they took. The group of them crossed the snow and arrived at a gigantic palace in the depths before long. Before Ling Han could report their arrival, a cold voice sounded from within, "Come on in." Su Zimo did not hesitate and entered with Monkey and the others, looking towards a woman who was not far away immediately. She looked extremely young and had hair that was as black as ink. Her robes resembled snow, her complexion was smooth and her bones and muscles looked coldly. She was like a fairy from the Moon Palace without any warmth at all. "How beautiful!" Little Fox could not help but remark softly. If nothing was wrong, this should be perfected Lord Luo Shui of Snowdrift Valley. The eyes of the white-robed woman shone brightly and looked at Su Zimo without blinking. For some unknown reason, little Fatty, Shijian and the others felt an uneasy nervousness being gazed at like that. Monkey reared his head and tried his best not to meet the white-robed woman's eyes. Even for the spirit tiger who was normally incapacitated at the sight of a beauty, he lowered his head at the moment without any vile thoughts, resembling a composed old monk. Ching Ching, Little Fox and the others averted their gazes instinctively as well. Su Zimo was the only one who stared at the white-robed woman quietly with a calm expression. A moment later, the white-robed woman nodded and looked back as an imperceivable hint of admiration flashed through her eyes. "I am Luo Shui. Everyone have a seat, there's no need to be uptight." At that moment, Little Fatty and the others finally heaved a breath of relief. Unknowingly, their backs were drenched in cold sweat. The chair beneath perfected Lord Luo Shui was sculpted from a gigantic ice block and was transparent with a cold chill. However, she sat on it as though she could not sense the coldness at all. Su Zimo said with cupped fists, "I am Su Zimo. Thank you for your assistance earlier on, perfected Lord Luo Shui." Perfected Lord Luo Shui asked instead with a fake smile, "And you aren't afraid that I might be harboring ill intentions?" "Initially, I had reservations about that." Su Zimo smiled. "However, I was no longer worried the moment I caught sight of you. I know you will definitely not do that?" "Why so?" Perfected Lord Luo Shui leaned forward slightly and questioned. Su Zimo replied, "Instinct." Perfected Lord Luo Shui gave a smile as a form of silent acknowledgement. "Although personal fights are forbidden in Myriad Phenomenon City, this is the territory of Snowdrift Valley and I've got complete control over your life. If I kill you right here, nobody can stop me." Perfected Lord Luo Shui said, "You've sure got guts for following her here without ascertaining anything." By her words, Perfected Lord Luo Shui was telling Su Zimo that that was the plan of the three major sects, Zephyr Thunder Palace, Purple Firmament Sect and Clear Wind Temple. Su Zimo pondered for a moment before speaking. 20 years ago. Nothing happened 20 years ago. As though she could read Su Zimo's mind, Perfected Lord Luo Shui waved it off casually and interrupted. The Immortal, Buddhist and Fiend sects were underhanded in that fight beneath the Human Emperor's palace. Although all of them claimed to be paragons, they fought you together. Notwithstanding the fact that Ling Han survived, even if she had died, she could blame no one for her lack of skills. Perfected Lord Luo Shui's words had the true magnanimity of someone from an immortal sect. "Do you want to make a guess why I helped you?" She shifted the topic and looked at Su Zimo, asking with a fake smile. Su Zimo pondered for a moment before saying in a probing manner, "Glass Palace?" It was inevitable for super sects in Tianhuang mainland to hold grudges against one another. The greatest opposition was between immortals and fiends. However, even among the 9 immortal sects, they were not always chummy as well. Glass Palace and Snowdrift Valley had a deep feud with one another. Su Zimo declared war against Glass Palace and annihilated their faction in the ancient battlefield immediately after he entered. It was only natural that Snowdrift Valley would feel closer to Su Zimo because of that. That's one of the reasons. Another reason is because I was also curious personally and wanted to see you. Perfected Lord Luo Shui looked at Su Zimo. I wanted to see how the strongest monster incarnate in history that defeated paragons of the 3 factions beneath the human emperor's palace looked like. I wanted to see if the brave, courageous man that dared to wage war against Glass Palace has 3 heads and 6 arms. Su Zimo smiled. I've disappointed you then. I look extremely ordinary, much less possess 3 heads and 6 arms. You did not disappoint me, you are good. Perfected Lord Luo Shui smiled as well. Little Fatty shifted his beady eyes and paused for a moment on Perfected Lord Luo Shui's face before looking at Su Zimo with an odd expression. Monkey and the others were brutish and did not sense anything. However, Little Fox had a nervous expression and gripped her paws instinctively. There was a hint of hostility in the way she looked at Perfected Lord Luo Shui, as though something dear to her was about to be snatched away. Chapter 717 Ancient Phenomenon Stele. Chapter 717 Ancient Phenomenon Stele. Perfected Lord Luo Shui merely smiled indifferently after sensing Little Fox's hostility as she asked, "How much do you guys know about the fight for the phenomenon ranking?" Su Zimo shook his head. Perfected Lord Luo Shui said, "Actually, the fight for the phenomenon ranking is not as bitter as you guys are imagining it to be." Ha! A look of surprise flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. He was certain that a bloodbath was inevitable since 100,000 paragons were gathered in Myriad Phenomenon City for an eventual 108 positions. But now that did not seem like the case. "Follow me." Perfected Lord Luo Shui soared into the air with a single motion and flew upwards of the gigantic palace. Everyone else followed immediately after. Before long, Su Zimo and the others arrived at the top of the palace and could almost see the entire Myriad Phenomenon City. A single glance across revealed that there were around 30 other structures as tall as this scattered across various parts of the ancient city. Su Zimo's vision was extremely powerful. He could vaguely tell that almost all of the tall structures were strongholds for various super sects. Of course, from the high ground, the most prominent spot of Myriad Phenomenon City was a mountain peak that towered into the clouds. The peak of the mountain had even surpassed the city walls of Myriad Phenomenon City and was hidden in the clouds. Perfected Lord Luo Shui looked at the mountain and said slowly, "You can see it too, that mountain is called the Myriad Phenomenon Peak. It is 108,000 feet tall and has 108 stone steps. The fight for the phenomenon ranking can be divided into 2 distinct parts. The first part is an elimination battle that takes place at Myriad Phenomenon Peak." "Elimination battle?" Su Zimo asked. Although there are more than 100,000 paragons in the city, after the elimination battle, only 108 will remain. Perfected Lord Luo Shui explained, "The rules of the elimination are simple. All you have to do is ascend the Myriad Phenomenon Peak. The higher you ascend, the higher your eventual ranking is on the phenomenon ranking. The 108 cultivators that ascend the furthest will become the new candidates for the generation's phenomenon ranking." Su Zimo frowned slightly and everyone else looked puzzled as well. Little Fatty blinked and asked, "That's all? What's so special about Myriad Phenomenon Peak? Are there dangers up there?" "No." Perfected Lord Luo Shui shook her head. "Fighting is forbidden on the Myriad Phenomenon Peak. Although ascending it seems like a simple task, most cultivators will be eliminated. There is a stele erected at the top of the Myriad Phenomenon Peak. It's the famous ancient phenomenon stele that was placed by Fairy Ling Long personally at the top of the peak in the past." Su Zimo narrowed his eyes. Indeed, there was a gigantic stele at the peak of Myriad Phenomenon Peak that gave off an ancient aura. "There's so many names on that stele." Su Zimo muttered softly. Perfected Lord Luo Shui turned and asked with slight disbelief, "Your vision is so powerful that you are able to tell that there are words written on the stele." Even she could not see what was on that stele given that distance. Yet, the fact that Su Zimo's vision had reached such a level while he was just a golden core was something that was frightening. In truth, the reason for this was due to illumination eye that Su Zimo had cultivated. Su Zimo stared for a moment and sensed his eyes prickling in pain. Immediately he retracted his gaze. There are many words on the stele with varied handwriting. They are not written by a single person. However, I could not see what was written exactly, Suzimo said. Perfected Lord Luo Shui nodded. That's right, the ancient phenomenon Stele has the names of many experts written on it, including the ancient emperors. All of it was written by them personally. Only those that can ascend the peak of Myriad Phenomenon Peak have the rights to leave their names on it. The ancient phenomenon Stele contains the power of golden core phenomenons from many paragons and monster incarnates throughout history. Its might shrouds over the entire place. Anyone that wishes to ascend the mountain will have to resist the pressure. At that point, Suzimo was enlightened. The ancient phenomenon Stele was at the mountain peak, and the closer one was, the greater the pressure they would experience. They were not merely ascending the Myriad Phenomenon Peak. Rather, they were ascending the path that multiple ancient emperors have treaded in the past. Naturally, the closer one was to the mountain peak was proof of the strength of their golden core phenomenons. If they could reach the peak, it would imply that they were comparable to the ancient experts of the past at the golden core realm. Perfected Lord Luo Shui said, there are a total of 108 stone steps on Myriad Phenomenon Peak, and the gap between each step is more than 1,000 feet. The closer to the top, the greater the pressure. At the end, it is almost impossible to cross the first stone step. Suzimo's gaze shifted. He saw that many cultivators were gathered beneath the Myriad Phenomenon Peak. During this period of time, there were already many cultivators attempting to ascend the Myriad Phenomenon Peak. Some of them were sent flying the moment they stepped foot on the first stone step. Some cultivators maintained their golden core phenomenons but were only able to struggle briefly on the first stone step before they were sent flying and fell not far away. Within a short 15 minutes, there were dozens of cultivators that attempted to climb the mountain, but not a single person could ascend to the second stone step. It's so difficult. Little Fatty was secretly stumped. Perfected Lord Luo Shui said, the names on the ancient phenomenon Stele have increased since the ancient era. This also means that the pressure that the later generations have to endure is even greater. It has already been around 1,000 years that nobody has been able to leave their names on the phenomenon Stele. The Golden Core Phenomenon ranking was released once every 100 years. 1,000 years meant that nobody had been able to ascend the peak and leave their names for 10 Golden Core Phenomenon ranking fights. A peerless figure that resembled an emperor who looked down on the entire world crossed Suzimo's mind, and he could not help but ask, Dean did not manage to ascend the peak 100 years ago as well. Dean cultivated the Golden Core Phenomenon, Chaos Ocean, that was left behind by the human emperor and was the number one of the previous phenomenon ranking. The Myriad Phenomenon Peak seemed a little scary if even someone like that could not reach the peak. No. Perfected Lord Luo Shui shook her head gently. Although Dean was the top of the phenomenon ranking 100 years ago, he stopped at the 99th stone step and could not advance further. Dean was too young 100 years ago after all. At that point, Suzimo vaguely realized that Dean's return was most likely not only for the number one position of the phenomenon ranking or the rewards that accompanied it. It was for his personal pride. In order to prove himself, he had to attempt to reach the peak and leave his name on the phenomenon Stele. Perfected Lord Luo Shui lamented, the phenomenon ranking refreshes once every 100 years. How many names on it would be remembered by the masses? However, the phenomenon ranking is preserved through history and passed down into the future. Suzimo's heart skipped a beat as he suddenly asked, as though he recalled something, who was the last person to leave his name on the phenomenon Stele? Perfected Lord Luo Shui came to a sudden silence. A long time later she said slowly, the current Azura Yen Beichen. Bingo. Suzimo nodded to himself. Perfected Lord Luo Shui seemed wary towards that name as she returned to the topic of the phenomenon ranking. The ranking battle comes after the elimination battle. After the elimination battle, the ranking of the 108 cultivators are only the initial placings. If 2 or more cultivators are on a stone step, there will be an eventual ranking battle. Suzimo understood. For example, if 2 cultivators arrive at the 100th stone step, they will have to engage in a real fight to determine the victor. Chapter 7:18 Old Friends. Chapter 7:18 Old Friends. The eventual aim of the Golden Core Phenomenon ranking is to gather the monster incarnates of the world. That's the reason why there isn't the situation of a mass fight to the death. Perfected Lord Luo Shui said, if many monster incarnates have to suffer immense losses all for the sake of a ranking list, That would go against the original intentions of Fairy Ling Long. Su Zimo nodded. The way of contending for the phenomenon ranking was indeed much milder and needless killing would be avoided. Perfected Lord Luo Shui said, the fight for the phenomenon ranking takes place 3 months later. At that time, 100,000 golden cores will be gathered at the base of the Myriad phenomenon peak. Perfected Lord Yu Jun of Enigma Palace will appear at that time to host, and apart from me, nascent souls of various super sects will spectate as well. Although the format of contention for the phenomenon ranking between the 100,000 paragons was relatively mild, the process will definitely be tense and exciting with a massive might. I've got it. Thank you for the information, Perfected Lord Luo Shui. Su Zimo greeted with cupped fists. Perfected Lord Luo Shui nodded. Your situation is unique since you are in possession of a great treasure such as the Divine Phoenix Bone and have offended many sects and factions. You can cultivate in this palace from today forth lest others create trouble for you. Countless eyes were locked onto Su Zimo in Myriad Phenomenon City. If he stayed here with Perfected Lord Luo Shui guarding over him, other sects and factions would not be able to trespass the territory of Snowdrift Valley to capture him. Thank you, Perfected Lord. Su Zimo expressed his thanks once again. Right? He recalled something and asked, Perfected Lord, may I ask if you've heard of cultivators from Elixir Yang sect entering the ancient battlefield? Although there were many opportunities and treasures in the ancient battlefield, they were accompanied by dangers. Not all super sects and top factions would send cultivators into the ancient battlefield. Although Elixir Yang sect was one of the 4 unorthodox groups, they did not specialize in combat, and it was only logical if they chose not to enter the ancient battlefield. The 4 unorthodox groups are all here, but they have yet to arrive in Myriad Phenomenon City, Perfected Lord Luo Shui replied. Su Zimo nodded. With Night Spirit escorting Xiaoning in the ancient battlefield, things should not be difficult. Although Su Zimo's group was hindered by many things along the way, they were able to continue on the road day and night thanks to their powerful strength. They were considered as the first batch of cultivators to arrive at Myriad Phenomenon City. The other cultivators could not afford to behave as recklessly as time. Most sects and factions would choose to rest at night and travel in the day so that they could avoid large-scale beast stampedes as much as possible for safety reasons. After mulling for a moment, Su Zimo asked again, has the god race appeared in Myriad Phenomenon City? Perfected Lord Luo Shui's expression changed starkly as she spun around at the mention of the words, god race. She glared at Su Zimo with bright eyes and asked slowly, you've seen the god race? I have. Qing Qing stood forward and said with conviction. What's the reason the god race has come here? Perfected Lord Luo Shui furrowed her brows with a grim expression. A moment later she waved it off. You guys can rest here first. Feel free to inform cultivators of Snowdrift Valley and come look for me should you require anything. All right. Everyone replied. The palace was extremely spacious and many rooms were provided for cultivation. Su Zimo and the others picked a few cultivation rooms at random and stayed for the time being. As time passed by, the number of cultivators gathered in Myriad Phenomenon City increased and it bustled with life. From time to time, the palace of Snowdrift Valley would receive news of the arrival of certain paragons or monster incarnates or how some of them ascended the Myriad Phenomenon peak. At this point of his cultivation, Su Zimo's inner core was already at its peak and was at the perfected state. He could break through at any moment upon leaving the ancient battlefield. It was almost the same for him at the Golden Core realm. It won't be long before he sensed the opportunity for a breakthrough as long as he continued cultivating. This day, Su Zimo was cultivating in his room when he received a voice message outside the door. Fellow Taoist Su, there are people from Thousand Crane sect here to see you. The voice of a Snowdrift Valley cultivator sounded. Thousand Crane sect. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he rose and said, please invite the fellow Taoists of Thousand Crane sect in. Everyone, let's go and meet an old friend. Su Zimo knocked on the doors of Little Fatty and the others. Who? Little Fatty stretched and walked out with drowsy eyes. You'll know soon. Su Zimo smiled and walked out first. Everyone had just entered the hall when a few cultivators walked in from outside. They were all female and an intricate spirit crane was etched on the sect badges on their waist. Their leader had a cold expression and fairy-like features, as though nothing could bother her. Little Fatty's eyes widened and he rubbed them hardly while exclaiming, Sister Leng Ro? The expression of the female cultivator from Thousand Crane sect was initially cold. When she heard that voice and turned to see the fatty and green-robed man opposite her, a hint of joy rose in her eyes. This was Lung Ro, who had joined Thousand Crane sect 20 years ago. Lung Ro had changed a lot after many years and her demeanor was colder than ever. However, there was warmth in the way she looked at Su Zimo, Little Fatty and the others. The moment he heard that disciples of Thousand Crane sect were here, Su Zimo thought of Lung Ro. Ha 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 ha. Suddenly laughter echoed from outside. Immediately after, a man entered the palace with fluttering robes. He was handsome and had a delighted expression as he smiled towards Su Zimo and the others. How can I be missing from a reunion with old friends? Senior brother Ji. Little Fatty exclaimed again with happiness in his eyes. It was Ji Qingtian who had joined Elixir Yang sect 20 years ago. Su Zimo, Little Fatty, Lung Ro and Ji Qingtian had not only been disciples of Ethereal Peak, they had even experienced life and death together. Su Zimo said loudly with cupped fists, Senior brother Ji, you look good as ever. How have you been? Ha ha. Ji Qingtian burst into laughter. I can't be compared to you. Throughout these years, even in the Middle Continent, I could hear some news of you. The details were even more frightening after you entered the ancient battlefield. Although Lung Ro did not speak much, the smile on her face did not vanish after she caught sight of Su Zimo, Little Fatty and Ji Qingtian. The cultivators of Thousand Crane sect were all surprised at the sight of that. In Thousand Crane sect, she was a well-known ice beauty who did not speak nor smile much. To think that Lung Ro was smiling more than she did for the past 20 years in Thousand Crane sect. In this foreign land, there was nothing more joyous than a reunion with old friends. Su Zimo kept looking out of the palace as though he was anticipating something. Don't worry, Xiaoning is also here. She's behind me. Ji Qingtian waved it off. Tang Yu is interacting with cultivators of Snowdrift Valley, but I slipped in here because I could not wait any longer, ha. A series of footsteps could be heard right as his laughter subsided. Su Zimo's gaze froze gradually. Not long after, more than 10 cultivators arrived together. Among them, a female cultivator wore faint yellow robes and had elegant features. She had a graceful bearing and her countenance resembled Su Zimo. The yellow-robed woman was none other than Su Zimo's sister whom he had not seen for years, Su Xiaoning. The siblings seemed to be telepathic and noticed one another instantly in the crowds. Instantly, Su Zimo's gaze softened. Bead-like tears welled up in Xiaoning's reddened eyes as she pursed her cherry lips. Words crammed in her throats endlessly, eventually converting into a yell. Brother? Chapter 719 Regret. Chapter 719 Regret. Xiaoning sprinted the entire way and threw herself into Su Zimo's embrace, ignoring everyone else. Although she had already grown up after 20 years, his embrace was spacious, warm and familiar as ever. Just like in the past, it could shield her from any storm and protect her from all dangers. Su Zimo patted Xiaoning on the back and he could barely conceal the emotions in his eyes as well. Most of the people present had seen Xiaoning before and naturally knew how close the siblings were. This was Little Fox's first time seeing Xiaoning and her gaze was filled with curiosity and surprise. She had never seen such emotions coming from Su Zimo throughout all these years. Everyone stood and watched quietly at the side without approaching to interrupt them. A long time later, Xiaoning broke free from Su Zimo's embrace and looked up at him, wiping away her tears. The siblings smiled at one another. Xiaoning seemed to have recalled something and slapped her storage bag. She retrieved an elixir and pinched it between her fingers before looking at Su Zimo joyfully. The elixir gave off a faint fragrance and Su Zimo merely took a quick whiff before he felt life surge into his body. This is? Su Zimo asked instinctively. Xiaoning waved it off casually and smiled. This is a longevity elixir, don't you recognize it? It can be used to help our brother extend his life. When he heard that and saw the smile on Xiaoning's face, Su Zimo's eyes dimmed dejectedly. Brother, what's wrong? Xiaoning was sensitive and asked curiously when she sensed the change in Su Zimo's mood. Su Zimo lowered his head slightly in silence. For some reason, Xiaoning panicked and the smile on her face stiffened as well. She opened her mouth slightly and wanted to speak, but stopped. She could vaguely sense something but she did not dare to ask. A long time later, she forced a smile and continued, the medicinal power of a normal longevity elixir is too strong and it's meant for golden cores. Ordinary mortals won't be able to endure it and they will explode and die. For all these years I've been researching on how to milden the effects of the longevity elixir. I tried to replace and fuse with different spirit herbs and I finally succeeded last year. I guarantee that Big Brother will definitely not be injured or exposed to any side effects after consuming it. Su Zimo remained silent. Gradually the smile on Xiaoning's face disappeared. Her eyes reddened once more as her petite frame trembled. She continued rambling incessantly, as though that was the only way she could hide her fear and panic. As long as Big Brother consumes this longevity elixir, he will be able to extend his lifespan by 50 years at least and we can be reunited once more. I'll have more time to research other elixirs that can extend his lifespan using that 50 years. Brother, don't worry, I'm now a legacy disciple of Elixir Yang sect. As long as I have sufficient time, I'll definitely have the capability to refine better elixirs. Silence ensued in the palace. Xiaoning's quivering voice was the only sound that reverberated. The three of us siblings will stay together forever without being separated, shall we? Xiaoning's heart was in pain and she could no longer continue. Finally, Su Zimo lifted his head and looked in Xiaoning's reddened eyes, saying slowly and gently, Big Brother has passed away. There was a boom. Xiaoning felt her mind go blank as she shuddered from her sadness and almost fainted. Tears gushed out of her eyes. Why? Her lips trembled and her face turned pale as she sobbed silently while murmuring repeatedly, how did this happen? Why did this happen? Heis. Everyone sighed emotionally at the sight of that. This was the cruelty of cultivating. There would eventually come a day when one's kin left them. Longevity was sought from cultivation. While seeking power, one would lose many other things. Xiaoning felt her heart wrench and her head spin. Her vision blurred and she lost consciousness completely soon after. Su Zimo supported Xiaoning and his expression only softened after he scanned her body with a trace of spirit energy. She merely fainted due to the great shock from her sorrow. Her body was not affected. Su Zimo was probably the only person who could empathize with Xiaoning's pain. Xiaoning only had a single goal for cultivating, refining elixirs, and even leaving her hometown to join Elixir Yang sect that was far in the middle continent. It was just so she could refine an elixir that could extend one's lifespan and do it for Su Hong. Now she has succeeded. However, Su Hong was gone. The most regrettable thing was that the two of them did not manage to see the other for one last time. The last time the two of them met was more than 20 years ago in Pingyang town when Xiaoning left with Ji Yaoshua. Who would have thought that the goodbye at that time was an eternal farewell? This might probably be a pain in Xiaoning's heart forever. Su Zimo was helpless regarding everything. However, each time he was reminded of his older brother and the citizens of Yen country who lost their families and homes in the raging flames of war, Su Zimo's resolve grew firmer. He was no saint and had never thought of saving the masses single-handedly or changing the world to create a grand era of peace. All he wanted to do was to give all living beings a choice. A chance for them to change their fates. Even without spirit roots, they can cultivate and escape the underworld to live long lives. In this chaotic world, as long as one couldn't cultivate, they had no control over their lives. Cultivators, bandits, beasts and birds were all threats and dangers for them. In this chaotic world, the outcome of the masses was destined to be tragic. Su Hong was one of them. If Su Zimo had not met Daiyu, he would have been one among many. That was why Su Zimo wanted to establish a Dao. Daiyu altered his fate for him. He wanted to alter the fates of the masses. I'm going to allow all lives in this world the ability to cultivate and become immortals. Su Zimo carried Xiaoning carefully and brought her into his cultivation room. He placed her down gently before returning to the palace and looked at everyone from Elixir Yang sect. Tang Yu was not much different from 20 years ago and was still dressed as a man, looking flirtatious and casual. Fellow Taoist, thank you for taking care of Xiaoning for all these years. Su Zimo cupped his fists towards her and nodded to express his thanks. Fu, you don't have to thank me. Tang Yu replied, Xiaoning's talent in elixir formation is above mine and is now the most regarded in the sect. If she continues cultivating, there are no limits to what she can accomplish in elixir formation. Within the sect. She paused for a moment before pointing to a black-robed man at the side and smiled with pursed lips. With Night Spirit guarding Xiaoning, nobody dares to bully her at all. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Night Spirit. He swept his gaze across earlier on but did not catch sight of Night Spirit in the crowd from Elixir Yang sect. Normally speaking, Night Spirit should always be by Xiaoning's side. Su Zimo was not the only one. At the mention of Night Spirit, the golden lion at the back rubbed his palms in secret and his ears propped up. Why was he ranked behind this Night Spirit that he had never seen before after they became sworn siblings? Furthermore, the golden lion heard that this Night Spirit character was merely just born slightly more than 20 years ago. In that case, Night Spirit was nothing more than an inexperienced cub. The golden lion snickered coldly in his heart and was prepared to teach this cub a lesson. Chapter 720 No Attachments. Chapter 720, No Attachments. Su Zimo's gaze was gradually fixed on a black-robed man in the crowd. The man looked very young and had a sharp face with a cold expression. His gaze was as deep as the sea and he could not be read. Although the black-robed man was neither tall, short nor muscular, his body gave off a feeling of agility, nimbleness and strength. It was as though the man did not have a single piece of flesh or muscle that was excess. The man stood on the spot motionlessly and seemed relaxed. However, Su Zimo could vaguely sense that he would be the first to react should anything happen. Extremely dangerous. Su Zimo could count with the fingers on one hand how many demon beasts of the same level could give him this feeling. The black-robed man stared at Su Zimo fearlessly and calmly. The glint in Su Zimo's eyes intensified. The eyes of the black-robed man turned deeper as well. As their gazes met, a shuddering murderous aura spread through the air and Monkey and the others felt their fur stand on end. Against that pressure, everyone went silent instinctively with bated breath. Just as everyone could barely withstand it, Su Zimo smiled and asked, "Night Spirit?" There was finally some expression on the black-robed man's face as he strode quickly before Su Zimo. Although his lips were pursed and he did not speak, he could not conceal the emotions and longing in his eyes. Ha 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 ha. Su Zimo burst into laughter and patted Night Spirit on the shoulder while nodding. "Thank you for taking care of Xiaoning for all these years. It's only right." Night Spirit spoke with a firm voice that resounded like metal. Initially, Su Zimo did not dare to acknowledge Night Spirit since he did not emanate any demonic chi at all. 4 ordinary demon beasts such as Monkey and the others, although they could take on human form and speak in human tongue at Golden Core Realm, they would inevitably emit demonic chi. Cultivators could recognize them right away after unlocking their spirit eyes. For demons, they would have to cultivate to the nascent soul realm and refine an essence spirit before they can hide their demonic chi completely. However, Night Spirit had a mysterious background and frightening bloodline. He must have awakened the legacy in his bloodline by now. He must have inherited some secret skill that allowed him to conceal his demonic chi at the Golden Core Realm. In other words, nobody could expose Night Spirit even if he were to hide within cultivators. "Huh? Your little Night Spirit?" Monkey approached with curiosity and circled around Night Spirit, murmuring, "Not bad, although your body is rather skinny, it does seem rather strong. You've changed so much. We couldn't even recognize you in your human form." The Spirit Tiger's eyes narrowed and he approached as well, sniffing and touching Night Spirit all around. "Little Night Spirit, do you remember me? I'm Little Crane. I brought you the milk of so many demon beasts and even brought you out to play. You must have been picky with your food again, look how skinny you are." Ching Ching came over and rubbed Night Spirit on the cheeks with her slender hands as well. His initially cold face was squeezed into odd shapes that looked amusing. Monkey could not help but grab around as well while grinning. There were many hands roaming around Night Spirit's body. Night Spirit could only roll his eyes in exasperation. Su Zimo could not hide his smile. Monkey, the Spirit Tiger and Little Crane once watched Night Spirit grow up and went out to hunt for food for him. None of them ever complained even if they were injured all over. If it was anybody else, they would be rendered a corpse before they even approached Night Spirit, much less touch him on the body. The 4 of them were delighted after their long-awaited reunion and played together without caring about what anybody else thought. Of course, Night Spirit loved to be quiet and was basically motionless. Most of the time, it was the Spirit Tiger and Ching Ching who were snickering merrily. Little Fox stood at the side and a hint of envy flashed through her eyes. Yes, he's indeed just a cub without any temper and is easy to bully. The Golden Lion sized Night Spirit up and thought to himself, "I'll let him have a taste of my power later on so that he'll know what's good for him and be 7th obediently." He felt that among the 7 of them sworn siblings, He had a noble bloodline and extraordinary combat strength. Yet how was he ranked as the seventh sibling at the end of the day? The Golden Lion was indignant. Right? The Spirit Tiger recalled something and patted Night Spirit on the shoulder. Let me tell you, we've become sworn siblings and we've included you as well. This is first. He pointed to Su Zimo, then at Monkey. This is second. I Hubadian am third. Ching Ching is your fourth sister and your fifth. Yes. Night Spirit seemed nonchalant regarding it. Even without vowing to be sworn siblings, he viewed Su Zimo and the others as kin. He was even less bothered about the rankings. You're not the youngest, you've got a sister and brother beneath you. Ching Ching snickered. This is Foxy, she's from the fox race and she's sixth. She's your younger sister, so you've got to take care of her in the future. Hello, brother Night Spirit. Little Fox greeted obediently. Night Spirit nodded. He was cold by nature and knew nothing about Little Fox at all. It was already a warm greeting for him to nod his head. You don't have to worry about that. The Spirit Tiger waved his huge hand. Foxy is close with first and nobody can hurt her with him protecting her. Night Spirit looked between Su Zimo and Little Fox. You're spouting nonsense again? Little Fox said softly with flushed cheeks. Monkey pointed to the Golden Lion at the side and said, That's seventh and he's your younger brother from the Golden Lion race. The Golden Lion walked over in huge strides with a smile on his face, greeting passionately, Brother Night Spirit, although this is the first time we're meeting, I feel as though I've known you for a long time. Shall we go somewhere else and get to know one another better? All right. Night Spirit looked at the Golden Lion indifferently and nodded. He could naturally sense the Golden Lion's hostility and took advantage of the flow. The Golden Lion was delighted when Night Spirit agreed to it, yelling, Brother Night Spirit, follow me. The Golden Lion headed towards his own cultivation room. Night Spirit followed soon after. Monkey, the Spirit Tiger and Ching Ching acted as though nothing was wrong and did not stop them, as though they were not bothered by what was happening. Su Zimo could not sit by idly and coughed gently, whispering beside Night Spirit, Be gentler, he's your younger brother after all. Night Spirit nodded. Bam. The doors of the cultivation room were bolted dead. Monkey, the Spirit Tiger and Ching Ching jumped on the spot and looked at the cultivation room far away with excited, gloating expressions. The Spirit Tiger said deeply, That stupid lion's going to last for 15 minutes. Ching Ching said, 100 breaths at most. Monkey said, 30. Boom. Before their words were finished, there was a loud bang from the cultivation room. The next moment, the doors were pushed open with a creak. Night Spirit walked out with a calm expression. Behind him, on the iron door of the cultivation chamber, the Golden Lion's entire body was stuck on it, sunken in. A human-shaped dent was caved in the solid iron door. The Golden Lion had a stumped expression and a lost gaze as sparkling tears flowed down from the corners of his eyes. He no longer had any attachments towards living. Chapter 721 Storm. Chapter 721, Storm. Ha 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 ha. Monkey clutched his stomach at the sight of that and burst into laughter, unable to contain himself any longer. Was that 3 breaths? He came out as soon as he went in. Golden Hair, you were way too fast. The Golden Lion finally realized that he was set up upon hearing the laughter of Monkey and the others as he glared at them begrudgingly. However, he could not blame others for this either, he was the one that asked for it. The Golden Lion gazed at Night Spirit's back with a hint of fear in the depths of his eyes. This man was way too frightening. Earlier on in the cultivation room, Night Spirit suppressed him within a single round. Furthermore, the Golden Lion could clearly sense that if they weren't sworn brothers, it would have been an ice-cold corpse that was stuck on the iron door. How is this a cup? This is a devil. The Golden Lion wanted to cry. Little Night Spirit, you've become so powerful after 20 years. Ching Ching was all smiles. When you were just born, you were only the size of a palm. Although you looked fierce, you were so fun to play with. Night Spirit pursed his lips and smiled bashfully. Ching Ching urged him, Hurry, revert to your true form. Let me see just how much you've changed. That's right, I haven't seen you in such a long time. I wonder how you look like now. The Spirit Tiger added, Back then, first looked through many ancient books to identify your background, but he couldn't find anything at all. Monkey looked at Night Spirit somewhat expectantly as well, waiting for the latter to revert to his true form. Night Spirit slumped his head slightly with a hesitant expression, as though he was conflicted internally and was in pain. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he said calmly, "There's nothing to see, he's almost the same as when he was young. Don't get excited out of nothing." In truth, Night Spirit had already grown massively after consuming the dragon egg. Now that 20 years were gone, Su Zimo had no idea what Night Spirit looked like either. However, when Su Zimo saw how conflicted Night Spirit was, he knew that the latter definitely had his difficulties and did not want to make things difficult for him. Night Spirit understood Su Zimo's intentions and looked at him gratefully. Surveying his surroundings, Su Zimo changed the topic and said with a smile, "Everyone, it's truly rare that the group of us are able to reunite in the ancient battlefield today. Let's have a drink." The road of cultivation was long and Tianhuang mainland was endless. Everyone had their own paths. Some people never meet ever again after farewells, let alone 20 years later. Now that they were reunited, the joy in their hearts was indescribable. That's right, there's still 3 months to the fight for the phenomenon ranking. Since it's still early, we'll drink till we're drunk tonight. Jiqing Tian was an easygoing man as well and agreed readily. "There's wine." Monkey smacked his lips and his eyes lit up. In the blink of an eye, a month passed. The number of cultivators gathered in Myriad Phenomenon City increased. Almost all the famous paragons of various sects and factions have arrived in Myriad Phenomenon City. It was a storm with the gathering of countless heroes. The arrival of every peerless paragon caused quite a stir within the city. During this period of time, Su Zimo resided within the huge palace of Snowdrift Valley and did not leave at all. Yet, news was transmitted one after another. Hang Chuyu, the paragon of Sword Sect, had arrived at Myriad Phenomenon City. 20 years ago, many successors of various major sects fought Su Zimo beneath the human emperor's palace and some died while others were severely injured. There was nothing to speak of about those who died. Some of the successors who were severely injured did not manage to recover entirely. Some of them became despondent from the setback of the huge blow and became nothing more than a commoner. Of course, there were also a few of them that underwent a metamorphosis and were reborn entirely. Hang Chuyu was one of them. He was not the only one. Pang Yu of Overlord Palace and Monk Juchen of Diamond Monastery had arrived in Myriad Phenomenon City one after another and caused a great commotion. The three of them were the most prominent paragons back in the past. Indeed, the three of them gave Su Zimo immense pressure during the fight beneath the human emperor's palace as well. It's no wonder why they're paragons. Within the huge palace of Snowdrift Valley, Su Zimo murmured softly and rubbed his fingertips against one another, causing a spirit crane that contained information of the three of them to disintegrate into dust. There were many paragons that were defeated by Su Zimo previously, but the three of them were the only ones who got back on their feet. A few things were detailed clearly in the spirit crane. 20 years ago, the three of them received massive blows from the battle beneath the human emperor's palace. Yet, that became a blessing in disguise and they gained countless opportunities after their breakthroughs. They cultivated legacy phenomenons of their sects and rose again to become the #1 golden cores of their respective sects. Of course, during this period of time, apart from the three of them familiar faces, a few other relatively foreign paragons were made known to Su Zimo. The fiend heir of Azura sect, Ren Tu. It was said that he was the most frightening successor to appear in Azura sect after the current Azura, Yen Beichen. He was only slightly more than 100 years old at this point of his cultivation, but his hands were filled with endless fresh blood. Legend has it that he was haunted by over 3 million vengeful ghosts and the stench of blood could be smelled everywhere he passed, resembling an endless hell. Apart from Hang Chuyu, Pang Yu and Monk Juchen, Ren Tu was also a strong contender for a top 10 position on the phenomenon ranking. Monk Jian Kong of Hollow Monastery. This successor was from Hollow Monastery and cultivated a top-tier ancient phenomenon of the Buddhist monasteries, the 7-floor pagoda. A pagoda was a Buddhist tower. In the Buddhist monasteries, a 7-floor pagoda was of the highest grade. Even from the ancient era, it was almost the limit for successors of Hollow Monastery to cultivate a 6-floor pagoda. There were barely any who could cultivate a 7-floor pagoda. Eventually, all of them got to the top of the phenomenon ranking and became the titular disciples of that generation. Now that Monk Jian Kong entered the ancient battlefield with his 7-floor pagoda, his intentions could not be clearer. Of course, everyone knew that although the 7-floor pagoda was strong, it was still inferior compared to the legacy phenomenon of the human emperor, Chaos Ocean. Above the palace, perfected Lord Luo Shui frowned slightly. The fight for the phenomenon ranking this time round is likely to be extremely intense. Previously, any ancient phenomenon would most probably make it to the top of the list, but things are different this time round. Ren Tu's Corpse Mountain Blood Sea and Monk Jian Kong's 7th-floor pagoda were both among them. In fact, many lost ancient phenomenons are reappearing in this era. A clash as such is rare even in the ancient era. Perfected Lord Luo Shui mulled deeply. You've got to be careful and not pit yourself against Diyin recklessly. Su Zimo had a calm expression and did not refute her. After all, Diyin's fame had been there for a long time. When he was in his 30s 100 years ago, Diyin suppressed various paragons domineeringly in the previous phenomenon ranking and obtained the top spot. In the eyes of many cultivators, although Su Zimo's rapid uprising and a few great battles have pushed his reputation up in recent years, he was still inferior to Diyin. At that moment, a shadow darted over. Ji Qingtian entered the palace, panting with a grim expression as he said slowly, "Diyin has arrived." Instantly, all the cultivators who were initially meditating in silence in the palace opened their eyes. That was a name nobody could ignore. Things in Myriad Phenomenon City had heated up completely. Chapter 722 Diyin, release him. Chapter 722 Diyin, release him. Su Zimo rose with an unyielding gaze. Even he could not maintain his composure at the mention of that name. 10 years ago he exchanged blows with Diyin at the bottom of Dragon Burial Valley and both of them sustained slight injuries. Furthermore, Diyin was the only one who could match him in melee combat. Su Zimo did not know how that person cultivated or the sorts of miraculous opportunities he had encountered to be able to temper his body to that terrifying extent. He was even more curious about how much that man has grown after 10 years. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. A series of figures soared into the air. Everyone arrived at the top of the palace and looked down at Myriad Phenomenon City. Almost at the same time, a series of figures rose in Myriad Phenomenon City. Everyone had their eyes on Diyin's arrival in the city. Roar! A deafening noise echoed. A gigantic and menacing demon beast walked through the long street domineeringly and everyone in front of it gave way fearfully. The fur on the beast's body was extremely long and it resembled a tiger in shape. It had a human's face, tiger's feet, teeth of a boar and its tail was 108 foot long. 4 horns that were incomparably sharp surged into the air. It was a primordial ferocious beast, the Tao Wu. Many cultivators in Myriad Phenomenon City arrived mounted on their spirit beasts. However, in the face of the Tao Wu, all the spirit beasts were docile and kept mum in fear. An ancient remnant beast that could not dodge in time at the front was swallowed whole by the Tao Wu and fresh blood sprayed everywhere. The owner of the ancient remnant beast turned frightfully, but he could only clench his teeth, endure things and leave. Although fighting between cultivators was forbidden within the city, there were no restrictions on killing between demon beasts. This is a being of the primordial era and it is extremely violent with incredible strength. Unknowingly, perfected Lord Luo Shui had arrived behind everyone and said slowly. Su Zimo nodded. 10 years ago, the primordial ferocious beast suffered a huge loss in his hands. Although it was extremely strong, its head was pinned violently to the ground by Su Zimo but it did not die. Now, it was clear that the primordial ferocious beast was even more terrifying than it was 10 years ago. I'm not his match. The golden lion shook his head with a grim expression. The spirit tiger took a deep breath and frowned when he sensed the aura the Tao Wu gave off. This fella is troublesome to deal with. Monkey remained silent and merely pouted his lips, seemingly in disdain. He had a prideful nature and would definitely not admit defeat even if he could not win the other party. Night Spirit was the most composed among everyone present. He looked at the Tao Wu that barged its way through the city with a cold gaze. There were no emotions in his eyes and they were like still waters. If the Tao Wu was already so frightening, how powerful would someone who could subdue that primordial ferocious beast be? Countless gazes in Myriad Phenomenon City were fixed on someone. A figure sat on the back of the primordial ferocious beast. The person did not look old and he wore purple robes. His brows extended to his temples, his eyes were shut and he had an indifferent expression that spread in all directions and suppressed the place. He was the top of the previous phenomenon ranking, the number 1 golden core of Tianhuang mainland, Diyin. Now that Diyin was back in this familiar place 100 years later, he was like an emperor that ruled over the world. Nobody could stop him. His reputation precedes him. This man sure is frightening. Ji Qingqian's pupils constricted as he shook his head and said somewhat dejectedly, "I don't even have the courage to strike against this man." Defeated before a battle. That was how powerful a person's aura could be. A cultivator's mental state could be affected even though they were kilometers apart. Right from the beginning, Dean did not even open his eyes. It might be because he was resting. Or, it might be because there was nobody in Myriad Phenomenon City who was worthy of him looking at. His simple act of sitting on the Tao Wu casually to enter the city had already brought forth immense pressure to all the cultivators in Myriad Phenomenon City. The nascent souls were no exception. Perfected Lord Luo Shui frowned slightly with a look of disbelief as she murmured, "His strength has already grown till such an extent." A middle-aged cultivator followed close behind Diyin blindly. "Perfected Lord Hun Yi." Perfected Lord Luo Shui's eyes flickered as she said softly, "To think that he would be here too." Su Zimo's gaze shifted. Behind Diyin and Perfected Lord Hun Yi were cultivators of Chaos Essence Sect, including Nie Hao, who was defeated by Lin Xuanji. All of a sudden. Su Zimo narrowed his gaze towards a cultivator in the Chaos Essence Sect crowd. To be precise, it was a little young monk. His hands were bound by a shiny silver rope that restricted his spirit energy, and he was being pushed forward. That little monk was none other than Ming Zhen, who was separated from Su Zimo after entering the ancient battlefield. Although many cultivators have gathered in Myriad Phenomenon City for the past few days, there was no news of Ming Zhen. Given Ming Zhen's capabilities, there were few people in the ancient battlefield who could suppress him. Even if Ming Zhen could not win them, he could definitely escape far away. To think that he would have met with Diyin. There were a few wounds on Ming Zhen's body with flesh that was ripped and rotten with pus blood. It was clear that he had suffered immensely along the way. Su Zimo's gaze turned cold. Ming Zhen chanted sutras and studied Buddhism and Zen daily at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. He was far away from mortal strife and possessed an innocent heart filled with sincerity. Each time Su Zimo had a question, Ming Zhen would explain carefully without a single bit of annoyance. In terms of seniority, Ming Zhen was his senior brother. However, Ming Zhen was extremely young and Su Zimo had always regarded him as a younger brother. When he saw the state that Ming Zhen was in, the killing intent in Su Zimo's heart surged instantly. Dean sensed something and his eyes jolted wide open. It was initially bright and sunny in Myriad Phenomenon City. The moment Dean opened his eyes, a shadow shrouded over the place and the temperature dipped. Many cultivators in Myriad Phenomenon City could not help but shudder with pounding hearts as their hair stood on end. Diyin's senses were way too sharp. He could sense Su Zimo's hostility almost instantly. Both their gazes met in midair. Ah, it's Su Zimo. One of them is the current #1 golden core and the other is the legendary strongest monster incarnate in history. The two of them are about to face one another. Many cultivators whispered. Both of their auras climbed continuously, neither of them was willing to express weakness. Suddenly, Su Zimo hollered with a thunderous force, "Diyin, release him." Su Zimo made use of a vocal technique from the Buddhist monasteries and his voice had the effect of resonance and awakening anyone from a state of stupor. Many cultivators felt their minds rattle. A weak-willed person might have bowed down immediately. The entire place went into chaos. Nobody in Myriad Phenomenon City dared to speak to Diyin in that manner. Even nascent souls had to show respect to Diyin. That was because Diyin could have advanced to the nascent soul realm 100 years ago. He suppressed his cultivation intentionally and waited till this day so that he could ascend the Myriad Phenomenon peak once more and leave his name on the ancient Phenomenon stele. Furthermore, he would definitely become a top-tier nascent soul the moment he advanced and could suppress almost all the perfected lords in the ancient battlefield. Nobody expected a face-off the moment they met one another. Furthermore, from Su Zimo's words, it seemed as though he meant something. Chapter 723 You're worthy? Chapter 723 You're worthy? Boom. Su Zimo descended from the skies and left a streak of air in his wake. He landed violently on the streets like a meteor in front of the crowd from Chaos Essence Sect. The stone slabs beneath his feet broke apart with a series of cracks that extended outwards. Dust billowed. Bang, bang, bang. Little Fatty, Shijian, Monkey and the others descended one after another as well and the entire ground quaked. No matter what, they would stand by Su Zimo's side unconditionally. Ming-Zhen jolted emotionally when he caught sight of Su Zimo. Dean sat on the Tao Wu's back high and above, glaring down at Su Zimo, who was not far away with his lips curled into a fake smile. Niehao stood out and pointed to Su Zimo, shouting, "Who are you? How dare you speak to senior brother D in that manner?" "Humph." Little Fatty sneered repeatedly, not willing to be seen as the weaker party. "Who the hell are you? Why are you barking here?" "You." Niehao was interrupted by Little Fatty before he could continue. "I wonder who it was that picked a fight with others only to receive an immense beating like a dog. Even his grandmother would be ashamed." "Ha ha ha ha." Monkey and the others burst into laughter. Little Fatty was good at talking. There was no way Niehao could be his match. He was naturally referring to how Niehao was taught a lesson by Lin Xuanji at the Astral Dragon Sputum Lair. It was indeed Niehao's trigger point, but he could not refute it at all. Niehao's face flushed scarlet when he sensed the burning gazes in the surrounding. However, he could only clench his teeth spitefully and was unable to say another word. "Dean, I'll say it one more time." Su Zimo raised his head slightly with a cold gaze before slowly saying, "Release him." Dean had a calm expression and was unmoved. However, the mockery in his eyes intensified. "Su Zimo, don't be reckless." Perfected Lord Luo Shui's voice sounded within his mind. "Fights between cultivators are forbidden in the city. Almost everyone has been alerted to this commotion. If you act recklessly in front of such a crowd, you will definitely be killed." Su Zimo knew it very well. Perfected Lord Luo Shui did not say that to frighten him, it was the truth. If he violated the rules of Myriad Phenomenon City, even she wouldn't be able to protect him. However, he could not sit by idly seeing that Ming-Zhen was in Di Yin's hands. "Su Zimo, remember what I told you," Di Yin said slowly. "I've warned you not to come into the ancient battlefield or you'll definitely die here." The moment he said that, a stir broke out in the crowd. From the sound of that, it seems like they've known one another previously. Yes, it seems like they've got a grudge with one another long ago. This should be interesting. Su Zimo said coldly, "I was the one that walloped your beast previously, it has nothing to do with others. You can come with me with all you've got, I'll take it all." "Fufu, interesting." Dean chuckled. "You've got to have bargaining chips if you want me to release him." "What do you want?" "Your right hand." Myriad Phenomenon City went silent instantly. Su Zimo's right hand was the legendary Divine Phoenix Bone. It was an utmost treasure of the universe. A legendary mythical object. It was a treasure that Khanate spirit weapons or even Khanate dermic weapons could not match. Fufufu. Suddenly, Su Zimo laughed and remarked nonchalantly, "Dean, you're afraid." "Would I be afraid of you?" Dean seemed to have heard the greatest joke in the world. Su Zimo shook his head. "You wish to leave your name on the ancient phenomenon stele and fight to be the top of the phenomenon ranking. Yet, you're afraid. You do not even have the courage to fight against me." "Humph." The Tao Wu glared at Su Zimo with endless hatred in its eyes. Back at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, it was nearly killed by a single palm strike from Su Zimo. That was the greatest humiliation in its lifetime. For the past 10 years with Di Yin's help, it obtained many opportunities and encounters as well. As such, its strength had climbed to a whole new level along with its confidence. The Tao Wu stomped on the ground furiously and grit its teeth. "You've got to get through me if you wish to fight my master. You think you're worthy of it?" Su Zimo swept his gaze and hollered, "Scram!" It was deafening like the explosion of a thunderbolt. A gigantic air current surged out of Su Zimo's mouth and almost formed a cyclone. Caught off guard, the Tao Wu shuddered and its ears rang continuously. It lost its footing from the coil of the cyclone and fell backwards uncontrollably. Di Yin frowned and pushed his body down to stabilize the Tao Wu. The Tao Wu shrugged its head and snapped out of its stupor. It steadied itself and the hatred in its eyes intensified. The crowd fell into an uproar. The Tao Wu was a primordial ferocious beast and was one of the most terrifying and fearsome types. Although there were around 100,000 paragons in Myriad Phenomenon City, there were probably less than 100 of them who could suppress the primordial ferocious beast. Nobody expected the beast to almost topple over because of a single shout from Su Zimo. The Tao Wu was enraged. Although it was a demon beast, it felt ashamed that something as such happened right in front of everyone. It had nowhere to vent the frustration in its heart. Tao Wus were easily enraged and were the most violent. At that moment, blood was the only thing that could quench the rage in its heart. The Tao Wu's eyes shifted towards the few demon beasts in human form behind Su Zimo and seemed to have thought of something. Oh. It cried a few times. Dean understood and nodded, saying, Su Zimo, I'll give you another chance. You can send a spirit beast to fight against my Tao Wu. If you can win it, I'll release him. If you lose, I'll spare your right hand for now, but you'll have to hand over your Purple Thunder manual. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. He sure has everything planned out. There are many spirit beasts in the city, but which of them is a match for the Tao Wu? Fufu, although that monkey from the previous time was strong, it is definitely not a match for the Tao Wu. On the surface he's giving Su Zimo a chance, but in reality, that is nothing but a dead end. The cultivators in the vicinity discussed. The spirit tiger, Ching Ching, the golden lion and little fox who were behind Su Zimo went silent. The spirit tiger said softly, if I have a little more time to cultivate, I might be able to try and take on that Tao Wu. But for now I can't win it. I'll do it. Monkey stood out. To be fair, he did not have much confidence against the enraged Tao Wu. However, if he entered the berserk state and triggered the mysterious power in his bloodline, he might have a chance to fight this Tao Wu to the death. Su Zimo was hesitant. This might be his only chance to save Ming Zhen. He could not afford to lose. It did not matter if he lost the Purple Thunder manual, but Monkey's life could be at stake if he lost. Let me do it. Suddenly, a calm voice sounded behind Su Zimo. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he was instantly at ease the moment he heard that voice. It was Night Spirit. He had almost forgotten about him. Su Zimo, do you agree to it? Dean pressed. All right. Su Zimo was no longer hesitant and agreed to it readily. Amazing. Dean smiled gently. Since it's a fight between spirit beasts, we'll both not interfere and let them fight to their heart's content. They'll fight to the death. Are you sure? Su Zimo raised his brow. Dean declared proudly, a gentleman will always honor his words. Chapter 724, Terrifying Night Spirit. Chapter 724, Terrifying Night Spirit. Go, fight to your heart's content. Su Zimo had nothing to instruct Night Spirit. The commotion caused here was great enough. Almost all the cultivators in Myriad Phenomenon City were alerted to it. Although the nascent souls of the super sects did not show themselves, Su Zimo was certain that they were observing everything from behind the scenes. Su Zimo was not worried that Dean would renege on his words in front of everybody. Night Spirit walked forward slowly from behind Su Zimo. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Instantly, countless gazes locked onto Night Spirit. Many cultivators had puzzled expressions on their faces. What is that demon beast? It looks skinny and frail. The Tao Wu might not even be full eating it. Has Su Zimo already given up? Compared to the mighty and gigantic Tao Wu, Night Spirit looked as minuscule as an ant at the moment. It was as though he could be crushed with a single stomp from the Tao Wu's feet. Furthermore, Night Spirit was unassuming and nobody even noticed him previously. He was way too ordinary. Even the demonic chi he emanated was a faint trace that seemed as though it could be blown away by a gust of wind. Dean narrowed his gaze and stared at Night Spirit for a long time. The black-robed man truly did seem ordinary. However, for some reason Dean felt his heart race inexplicably. He glanced sideways and whispered, Elder Hun-Yi, can you tell what's the background of that beast? Perfected Lord Hun-Yi shook his head. I can't. After a moment he continued, however, even if it's a pure-blooded ferocious beast, it won't be a match for the Tao Wu. Dean nodded in agreement. Yes. He has a trace of essence blood from the primordial Tao Wu within his body and his physique has strengthened to a frightening degree. He can stand a chance even against the primordial 9 races. Be careful. Dean patted the Tao Wu beneath him and rose into the air. Don't worry, Master. The Tao Wu said murderously, I'll definitely bite off this little fella's head and savor it slowly. Swash. The Tao Wu transformed and its gigantic body vanished instantly. It turned into its human form and stood in front of Night Spirit with mocking eyes. Little fella, you had better revert to your true form or you won't get a chance to do so anymore. The Tao Wu snickered. As for me, I'll be able to rip you apart using this human body. Everyone knew that demon beasts could take on human form, but their full strength could only be released in their true forms. The fact that the Tao Wu was in human form and yet requested Night Spirit to revert to his true form was an indication of how much it looked down on the latter. However, everyone felt that it was only right. Furthermore, everything felt that even if this ordinary black-robed man reverted to his true form, he would merely struggle a little longer before his eventual death. Night Spirit was emotionless against the Tao Wu's ridicule, and his eyes suddenly turned dark. The temperature in the voids dipped instantly. A shuddering killing intent surged. Swash! Night Spirit made his move. In a flash, he vanished from the spot. Su Zimo's eyes lit up. Night Spirit had not changed after 20 years. The murderous aura around him was completely cold and was released the moment he attacked, resembling an endless night that brought forth despair. The Tao Wu transformed into its human form. Night Spirit was not going to mock, ridicule, or even bear any thoughts of an undeserved victory. For him, this was merely an opportunity. Night Spirit's mind was only filled with how he could kill his enemies swifter and more efficiently. A black shadow darted by like a phantom. By the time the Tao Wu reacted, Night Spirit was already beside it. It was too fast. The speed, precision of timing and angle caused Su Zimo to feel shocked. Di Yin's expression changed starkly. How sharp were his eyes! The moment Night Spirit made a move, he had already realized that the Tao Wu was in deep trouble. Night Spirit reached out with outstretched fingers and grabbed from the side of the Tao Wu's body. Roar! The Tao Wu was scared out of its wits and could not help but roar when it saw that it was too late to dodge. Its tendons and bones rang and its blood qi surged as its body expanded. It had reverted to its true form right away. That was a wise decision. If it tried to dodge and was a step slower, it would have been turned into a corpse. Layers of thick fur lined the Tao Wu's body. The fur was shiny and bright, resembling a metal gauze that was stacked layer upon layer such that even supreme-grade spirit weapons could not penetrate it. There was even less chance of its flesh being injured. A flash of blood appeared. Night Spirit's scratch tore through the Tao Wu's defense and ripped off a piece of flesh from its massive body. Howl! The Tao Wu howled in pain and shuddered. Thankfully, it reacted in time and its body expanded after it reverted to its true form while his flesh turned firmer. Because of that, Night Spirit's attack deviated slightly from its original position and the Tao Wu's tendons and bones were not injured. If it was a bit slower, its abdomen would have been torn by Night Spirit's scratch. A wave of shock and astonishment could be heard from the crowd. That scene had truly exceeded their expectations. Nobody expected the primordial ferocious beast, the Tao Wu, to be the one injured the moment they fought. Roar! The Tao Wu howled in rage and twisted its body, raising the 4 sharp horns on its head before thrusting towards Night Spirit violently. Its bloodline churned and the 4 sharp horns turned incomparably grisly, resembling burning spears. Blood qi gushed out stream after another. Its blood qi was intensifying. Many cultivators had grim expressions and were secretly shocked. The power released by the Tao Wu could even destroy the golden core phenomenons of most of the cultivators present. Night Spirit had a gold gaze and did not bother to take the 4 incoming horns head-on. He shuddered and his body turned extremely light all of a sudden as he pushed against the sharp horns and arrived on the head of the Tao Wu. The Tao Wu's expression changed. Night Spirit did not give the Tao Wu a chance to react and punched it viciously on the head like a hammer. Boom. There was a deafening sound. Crack, crack, crack. The jarring sound of bones cracking echoed. All the cultivators present felt their scalps prickle and hairs stand on end when they heard the sound. It was too ruthless. As a primordial ferocious beast, the Tao Wu's bones were probably tougher than perfect spirit weapons. But now they were shattered by Night Spirit's bare hands. It was no wonder why the Tao Wu was a primordial ferocious beast. Despite its severe injuries such that its brain juice was seeping out, its body was still producing a tremendous amount of life force. The Tao Wu's eyes were bloodshot and its blood qi surged into its mind. It reached out with its massive palm and grabbed for Night Spirit at the top of its head in a deranged manner. A single punch, that was all. Night Spirit's figure had already disappeared. Like a phantom, a shadow slid down the gap between the Tao Wu's neck and arrived at the bottom before striking. The process of leaping onto the Tao Wu's head for a punch before sliding down to its throat was fluid as water without any sluggishness. It was clean and precise. Night Spirit stretched his hand like a dagger and thrust it into the Tao Wu's throat. When he pulled his palm out, it was stained with blood, it seemed like he had grabbed a twitching python that was filled with blood and billowing with steam. The Tao Wu's throat was crushed and Night Spirit had even pulled its windpipe out. It was way too savage. Psst. Gasps could be heard all around. Chapter 725, No Other Choice Than to Kill You. Chapter 725, No Other Choice Than to Kill You. Boom. The massive body of the Tao Wu could not hold on any longer and fell onto the ground heavily, causing dust to rise everywhere. Streams of grisly blood flowed from beneath its body. It was over. The head of the Tao Wu was smashed apart and brain juice seeped. Its life was completely severed with its windpipe pulled out. Even a deity could not save it. Night Spirit stood silently at the side with an extremely calm expression, his body drenched in fresh blood. It was as though he had just killed an ant, not a primordial ferocious beast. The entire process happened too quickly. It was especially so for Night Spirit's final 2 killing moves. Even perfected Lord Hun-E could not react to it, let alone the Golden Cores who were watching. What was even more shocking was that Night Spirit had not reverted to his true form the entire time. This meant that Night Spirit was not using his full strength. Even until now, nobody knew what Night Spirit's true form was or what race he was from. Gazing at the lifeless Tao Wu, Dean was silent and his expression was frighteningly grim. Beast, how dare you? Kill him. The cultivators of Chaos Essence sect were enraged and yelled one after another. Some of them even withdrew their flying swords from their storage bags. Su Zimo shielded Night Spirit behind him and glared at Dean alone with a scorching gaze. This gambit was suggested by Dean. He had to acknowledge it in front of everyone. Dean was the top of the previous phenomenon ranking and was lauded as the #1 Golden Core. If he reneged on his words, his reputation would be tarnished. This was the true meaning of swallowing one's indignance. He could only endure as he watched his spirit beast die. Dean raised his hand gently. That single action caused the air in the void to turn stale and the pressure in everyone's hearts mounted. The noisy cultivators of Chaos Essence sect shut their mouths instantly. Complete silence overwhelmed the long street. Even though it was a setback, he was still the peerless #1 perfected being that looked down on the entire world. A single action from him was enough to suppress everything. Release him. Dean said slowly without any emotions. None of the Chaos Essence sect cultivators behind him dared to disobey his words and untied the silver rope on Mingzhen obediently before releasing the latter. Mingzhen staggered and Su Zimo rushed up to support him. Thank you, Zimo. Now that Su Zimo had returned to the secular world, Mingzhen could not call him junior brother any longer. Furthermore, their relationship was considered as a secret and outsiders did not know about it. Mingzhen lowered his head. The fact that Su Zimo was dragged into this affair caused the innocent young monk to feel a sense of guilt. Su Zimo did not say much and merely patted Mingzhen gently on the shoulder. He withdrew a few bottles of elixirs from his storage bag and passed them over. Take these elixirs to stabilize your condition and deal with the injuries first. Mingzhen nodded and received them. Dean stood in the air and looked down at Su Zimo and Night Spirit with a chilling gaze. He did not hide his killing intent at all. Everyone could sense that Dean was truly enraged at the moment. Su Zimo, this is considered your victory. After a suffocating silence, Dean finally spoke slowly, however, I'll use your fresh blood as a tribute for my spirit beast. You and you. Dean pointed to everyone beside Su Zimo and said word by word, I'll have all of you guys buried together with it. None of you shall escape. All the cultivators around looked at Su Zimo's group with pity in their eyes. Needless to say, it was a tragedy for them to be targeted by such a terrifying existence. Pooey. Monkey spat in Di Yin's direction with disdain. Ha. Little Fatty was optimistic by nature and broke into laughter while pouting his lips. Dean, you are strong and I'm not your match. However, Myriad Phenomenon City has its own rules. You can't possibly attack me here, right? I'll stay in the city from now on. Let's see who's afraid of whom. Private duels were forbidden in Myriad Phenomenon City. Even with his torrential hatred, it was inconvenient for Dean to attack. Dean was expressionless as he replied indifferently, It doesn't matter, mark my words today, you will eventually leave this city. No matter where you guys end up after today in any corner of the universe, I'll definitely hunt you down relentlessly. The void was filled with a murderous intent when he said that. Even the cultivators watching in the vicinity shuddered in fright, let alone little Fatty's group. There would be no peace in the future after being targeted by someone this terrifying. One could barely even take a peaceful nap. Nobody had any doubts about Di Yin's capabilities. Throughout history, he was the only monster incarnate that inherited the legacy phenomenon of the human emperor. Once he exits the ancient battlefield and advanced to the nascent soul realm, a golden core of his level would definitely be undefeated in the nascent soul realm as well. At that time, nobody of the same level could stop him. With that said, Di Yin turned and flew into the distance without looking at Su Zimo's group. In that case, I've got no other choice but to kill you. Suddenly, a calm voice sounded, but it shook the entire world. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Countless gazes of disbelief turned towards Su Zimo. Despite Di Yin's domineering words and threat, Su Zimo could refute with a statement against the former without losing out in aura. Su Zimo did not conceal his killing intent as well and pointed at Di Yin directly. You? Kill me? Di Yin froze as though he had heard the greatest joke in the world. He laughed with a mocking gaze while shaking his head. That's right. Su Zimo said slowly with a firm voice, I'm going to kill you. You don't have to search in every corner of the universe, I'll do it right here in Myriad Phenomenon City. Di Yin threatened little Fatty and the others. Since that was the case, Su Zimo was going to kill this threat preemptively. Everyone was stunned. Fighting was forbidden in Myriad Phenomenon City and there was no chance for the two of them to engage in a battle. How could Su Zimo kill Di Yin? Di Yin pondered for a moment and understood what Su Zimo was implying. You want to kill me? Sure. He sneered, I'll await you at the peak of Myriad Phenomenon Peak. We'll talk about it if you're worthy to come up. Everyone was enlightened. That was the only chance for them to fight. As long as they were on the same stone step, Enigma Palace will host a fight to determine the victor and the eventual ranking of the phenomenon ranking. Frog in the well, you don't even know who you're challenging. By the time that voice sounded, Di Yin's figure had already disappeared at the end of the long street. Although Su Zimo is the strongest monster incarnate in history, isn't he way too cocky? It's not so easy ascending the Myriad Phenomenon Peak. That's right, even Di Yin had to stop at the 100th step 100 years ago. We don't even know if this guy is stronger than Di Yin, but he went ahead and declared that he wanted to kill the latter. That just shows his ignorance. The stronger the paragons, the smaller the difference in their strengths. It's already difficult enough for them to win one another, let alone kill one another. He did not even manage to kill Su Cheng of Zephyr Thunder Palace, so how is he going to kill Di Yin? What a joke. The surrounding cultivators dispersed and discussions could be heard faintly. Su Zimo merely smiled nonchalantly when he heard their remarks. No matter what, he resolved something on his mind by saving Mingzhen today. As for his feud with Di Yin, the outcome will naturally be revealed at the fight for the phenomenon ranking 2 months later. Chapter 726, Start of the Phenomenon Ranking. Chapter 726, Start of the Phenomenon Ranking. Su Zimo's group returned to the palace of Snowdrift Valley. Along the way, he had a vague understanding of what Mingzhen experienced for the past few days. As Su Zimo had expected, although they were separated, Mingzhen's cultivation base was firm and his strength was immense. He had also made up for his lack of battle experience in the past few years. Although he met with many ferocious beasts and ancient living beings along the way, he got out unharmed. Mingzhen wore simple monk robes and merely muttered a Buddhist proclamation softly each time he came across a crowd before keeping his distance. He was truly someone with no desires and at peace. Naturally, most cultivators would not attack him for no reason as well. During this period of time, he caught sight of cultivators taking advantage of a female cultivator and truly could not let it pass by. Because of that, he took the initiative to attack and injured someone from the Fiend sections. Su Zimo understood from Mingzhen's description. The Fiend sect cultivator was not a nobody. If he was not wrong, that should be Shangguanyu, the Fiend heir of one of the 7 Fiend sects, Cloud Rain sect. He could be considered as an acquaintance as well. Back beneath the human emperor's palace, Shangguanyu was nearly killed by Su Zimo and escaped with severe injuries. To think that he would have entered the intermediate ancient battlefield 20 years later as well. Cloud Rain sect placed emphasis on the Tao of origin and was free from the bindings of men and women. There were no restrictions on their bodies and souls as they engaged in sexual intercourse, fusing yin and yang. Unfortunately, Shangguanyu came across Mingzhen. Ming Zhen had a pure heart and spent his days reciting sutras and studying Buddhism and Zen. His mind was clear and his heart was flawless. Even if Demonist Ji and Little Fox made a move at the same time, it would be difficult to stir Ming Zhen's heart, let alone Cloud Rain's sect. Not long after Ming Zhen met Diyin. The two of them had a conflict at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley previously. Naturally, there was no way Diyin would let him off. Ming Zhen was still too inexperienced against Diyin. He was captured alive before he could even release his Golden Core phenomenon. The fight for the Golden Core phenomenon ranking starts 2 months later. Rest well and recover from your injuries first. Su Zimo exited after settling Ming Zhen down. He gazed at a tightly shut cultivation room in the distance with a worried expression and sighed. Xiaoning had cooped herself in the room for the past few days and had lost weight, but she refused to come out. Su Zimo did not know how he should console her either. The deeper one's attachments were, the harder it was to sever them. The more pain one would feel after they were severed. Nobody else could help Xiaoning, she was on her own. Furthermore, Su Zimo was enduring immense pressure at the moment as well. It was not merely because of Diyin. There were many hostile super sects and factions in Myriad Phenomenon City. Zephyr Thunder Palace was bent on getting their hands on the Purple Thunder Manual and would definitely not let him off. And now, apart from Zephyr Thunder Palace, Clear Wind Temple and Purple Firmament sect that stood out and tested him together upon his entry into the city, nothing else had happened. Su Zimo believed that the super sects would not let things go so easily. Nascent souls could attack freely in Myriad Phenomenon City. Indirectly, that gave rise to many more variables. That was not all. Su Zimo had something else on his mind. Nian Qi's whereabouts. At the same time, Nian Qi's background involved an even more frightening faction, the God Race. Even perfected Lord Luo Shui's expression changed starkly at the mention of the God Race. What was the reason for the God Race's appearance in the ancient battlefield? There was also Night Spirit. Night Spirit had not shown his true form at all. Even when he fought against the Tao Wu, he merely fought in his human form. On the one hand, it could be interpreted such that Night Spirit could kill the Tao Wu without reverting to his true form. On the other hand, it could also mean that Night Spirit had reservations about it. There were many signs that caused Su Zimo to lean towards the latter. However, what was Night Spirit concerned about? Would he get into huge trouble if he reverted to his true form? The culmination of many things weighed down on Su Zimo's heart. Myriad Phenomenon City entered a state of peace after Night Spirit killed the Tao Wu. However, as time passed by, the atmosphere within the city turned increasingly repressed and tense, even suffocating. It was like the calm before the storm. A storm was brewing. Another 15 days passed. Finally, a piece of news that broke the peace of Myriad Phenomenon City arrived. The fight for the Golden Core Phenomenon ranking was going to start in 3 days' time. Compared to the original timeline, it was brought forward by an entire month. Although many cultivators discussed it, nobody knew the reason. 3 days later morning. At daybreak, figures sped towards the Myriad Phenomenon peak one after another in the city. A grand occasion like this only happened one every 100 years. Nobody would miss it even if they were not taking part. Su Zimo and the others gathered in the palace of Snowdrift Valley, prepared to leave. The doors of a cultivation room opened with a creak. Everyone turned towards the sound. Unexpectedly, Xiaoning had come forth as well. This was the first time that she had left the cultivation room during this period of time. Her face looked paler and her cheeks and body became skinnier as well. Yet, it seemed as though she had let go of something today and her eyes were livelier and brighter. Xiaoning? Su Zimo asked tenderly as though he was afraid of alarming her. Xiaoning smiled gently. Brother, I'm fine. Su Zimo was relieved when he saw Xiaoning smile as he heaved a deep breath. Sister Xiaoning, it's great that you're all right. All of us have been worried about you during this period of time and we hope that you would recover as soon as possible. Little Fox walked forward and wrapped around Xiaoning's arm gently. Little Fatty, Lung Ro, Ji Qingtian and the others were relieved and had encouraging looks in their eyes. Xiaoning's eyes were slightly red as she bowed deeply to everyone. I've caused all of you to worry during this period of time. Everything will be fine now that you've overcome this. Ji Qingtian said warmly, those in the past have already left, but you have to cherish those around you so that you won't have any further regrets. In all fairness, the sibling relationship between Su Zimo and Xiaoning was something that everyone envied. By this point of their cultivations, their kin had passed away a long time ago and they were almost severed from mortal ties. The relationship between the siblings was something extremely rare in the cruel world of cultivators. Let's go, we'll ascend the path of the past today and check out the talents of the world. Su Zimo was in high spirits seeing that Xiaoning was fine. He waved and led everyone out of Snowdrift Valley towards the Myriad Phenomenon Peak. The Myriad Phenomenon Peak was 108,000 foot tall and its peak extended into the clouds. It was difficult to see the top with one's eyes. The mountain gave off a majestic aura that was ancient. For countless years, it witnessed the rise and fall of many paragons and the making of history. Any cultivator would seem incomparably significant compared to the mountain. A massive, dense crowd of cultivators gathered in midair and sped towards Myriad Phenomenon Peak. The fight for the phenomenon ranking this time round was unusually intense. Of the 9 immortal sects, apart from Glass Palace that was destroyed by Su Zimo, paragons from the other 8 were present. They were either classy, graceful, cold or casual in their bearings. Of the 7 fiend sects, apart from the fiend heir of 7 kills sect that was killed by Su Zimo, paragons of the other 6 were present. They were either menacing, murderous, bewitching or nefarious in their bearings. Of the 6 Buddhist monasteries, apart from the paragon of Dapamkara Monastery, paragons of the other 5 were present. They were either dignified, noble, pure or filled with the glow of Buddha in their bearings. Chapter 727, 16 Perfected Lords. Chapter 727, 16 Perfected Lords. Before long, a dense crowd of cultivators was gathered at the Myriad Phenomenon Peak. It was a black, massive crowd that contained at least 100,000 people. Among them, Su Zimo caught sight of a few familiar faces. The first one he noticed was Dean of Chaos Essence Sect. No matter where he was, that man was bedazzling and brilliant. The two of their gazes met in midair and sparks flew. Dean smirked coldly before turning over. Apart from Dean, Su Cheng of Zephyr Thunder Palace was present as well. Su Cheng had a grim expression and glared at Su Zimo coldly, harumphing to himself. Wu Feng of Purple Firmament Sect and Duan Qingping of Clear Wind Temple were present too. After 20 years, the aura of Hang Qiuyu from Sword Sect turned even sharper and his eyes shone with a blinding sword light. Hang Qiuyu held immense hatred towards Su Zimo as well. Sensing something, Su Zimo turned and caught sight of another person. The person had black hair and wore black robes. His face was pale, stoned and expressionless as he walked silently through the crowd with a sheathed long sword in his hands. He was not fast. It was more like a stroll as he walked step by step. He had no followers, no sect mates and merely walked forward alone with his sword. The reason why this man's presence could be felt from the crowd was because the edge he gave off was comparable to Hang Qiuyu's. If Hang Qiuyu was someone whose edge and sharpness was completely exposed, this man was completely reserved. Dugu Jian. He was someone from one of the 4 great gentry clans of the North region. During the fight for the Vermilion Fruit in the Great Qian Ruins, despite being a stranger, this man helped Su Zimo and crippled the successor of Heavenly Piercing Sword Sect. Dugu Jian paused in his tracks and looked over as though he could sense Su Zimo's gaze. Su Zimo smiled gently and gestured with a nod of his head. Although Dugu Jian was expressionless, his eyes seemed to stir for a brief moment before he retracted his gaze and continued towards the Myriad Phenomenon Peak. From the Fiend sects, apart from the notorious Ren Tu of Azura Sect, Pang Yu of Overlord Palace was also rather prominent. Pang Yu was a head taller than other cultivators and carried a gigantic black spear on his shoulder. He strode like a brute and was absolutely menacing with a fierce gaze. Before long, Pang Yu caught sight of Su Zimo as well. Surprisingly, he was not hostile towards Su Zimo and even grinned while cupping his fists from a distance. Su Zimo returned the greeting with cupped fists as well. Apart from the paragons, the most striking thing around the Myriad Phenomenon Peak was 16 white clouds that hovered in midair. Above each cloud was a cultivator in a lotus position that gave off a shuddering aura. There were 16 nascent souls. Through their attires and the sect badges on their waists, the backgrounds of the 16 nascent souls could be seen easily. Among them, from the 9 immortal sects, apart from Glass Palace, nascent souls from the remaining sects, Heavenly Dipper Sect, Snowdrift Valley, Purple Firmament Sect, Chaos Essence Sect, Clear Wind Temple, Zephyr Thunder Palace, Sword Sect and Soaring Feather Sect, were here to watch the battle. Those 8 white clouds were relatively closer to one another. Perfected Lord Luo Shui was among them. As for the 7 fiend sects, only 2 nascent souls from Azura sect and Overlord Palace were present. From the 6 Buddhist monasteries, apart from Dapamkara Monastery, nascent souls from the other 5, Dapamkara Monastery, Hollow Monastery, Formless Monastery, Wisdom Monastery and Clear Heart Nunnery, were present. There were a total of 15 nascent souls from the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sections. On the 16th cloud, a gray-robed cultivator with fluttering robes sat. He held a feather fan and looked out of this world. Su Zimo's gaze shifted towards Lin Xuanji who was nearby. That's perfected Lord Yu Jun of Enigma Palace. His cultivation is unfathomable and he's also the host for the Golden Core Phenomenon ranking this time round. Suddenly a tender voice sounded. A fragrance wafted over and a beautiful young girl appeared beside Su Zimo. Dressed in pink, her eyes were brightly clear and she looked naive and innocent, as though she was younger than Little Fox. Little Fatty and the others were shocked and retreated immediately. They did not dare to look over and their eyes were filled with cautiousness. Although the girl looked harmless, she was the pure maiden of the fiend sex who could bewitch the masses. Even women could fall into her trap if they were careless, let alone men. Su Zimo glanced sideways and smiled. You're here too. Of course, how can I be missing from a crowd as such? Demonish Ji snickered. Even without Ji Yaoxue, the relationship between them would not be superficial as well. Back when the paragons of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects grouped up against Su Zimo beneath the human emperor's palace, this young girl was the only one who stood by his side without any hesitation. Su Zimo did not care about what she meant by referring to him as her tripod. Even if he had to be her tripod, he was willing to since she chose to stand by him given those circumstances. He did not have many friends. No matter what, she was one of them. The impact of the battle beneath the human emperor's palace 20 years ago was too great. Demoness Ji raised her chin sorrowfully. Although previous fights for the phenomenon rankings were intense as well, there weren't so many famous nascent souls present to watch and control the situation. Everything is because of you. Ha! Su Zimo was surprised. Initially, he thought that it was a common sight for nascent souls to arrive at Myriad Phenomenon City. Demoness Ji looked at the 16 clouds in midair and said, the nascent souls sitting there are not weak sealers in their twilight years. Su Zimo could tell that as well. The nascent souls on the clouds were all filled with vitality and life. It was clear that they were in their prime. Demonish Ji continued, not only that, apart from perfected Lord Yu Jun of Enigma Palace, the remaining 15 nascent souls are powerful experts that are famous in parts of Tianhuang mainland. Perfected Lord Luo Shui of Snowdrift Valley, perfected Lord Hun Yi of Chaos Essence Sect, perfected Lord Beidou of Heavenly Dipper Sect. None of them are nobodies. Su Zimo was even more puzzled as he asked, what has their appearance here got to do with me? It's because of that battle beneath the human emperor's palace 20 years ago. Demonish Ji replied, don't think that it was nothing much because it was a fight between Foundation establishment cultivators. It caused quite a huge stir among the super sections. Paragons groomed by the super sects were killed and injured after that battle. I presume that the presence of these top-tier nascent souls is to prevent something similar from happening. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. He had a vague feeling that things weren't as simple as that. His spirit perception was exceptionally sharp. On the surface, it looked like those nascent souls were high and above, sitting on their clouds while engaging in idle, casual conversations. None of their gazes were locked on him. However, he had been here for less than 15 minutes but he already sensed more than 20 spirit consciousnesses sweeping past him. Demonish Ji said, if this was in the past, given the way the fiend sects conducted themselves, they wouldn't have bothered sending nascent souls into the ancient battlefield. But now, even Azura sect and Overlord Palace sent people here. Sensing the worries in Su Zimo's heart, Demonish Ji chuckled. You don't have to worry, none of them will dare to behave recklessly with Enigma Palace in charge. Everyone please be silent. Suddenly a voice sounded in midair. Although it was neither loud nor soft, it was transmitted to every single corner of Myriad Phenomenon City. Chapter 728, You Are What You Think. Chapter 728, You Are What You Think. The voice of perfected Lord Yu Jun sounded. It seemed to possess an inexplicable pressure as the 100,000-odd cultivators gathered around the Myriad phenomenon peak quietened down before long. The rules of phenomenon ranking fight are divided into two parts, the elimination battle and the eventual ranking battle. I won't elaborate on the details. Cultivators that could arrive in Myriad Phenomenon City were mostly paragons of the various major sects and factions. Even if there were itinerant cultivators, they would have asked about the generic rules earlier on. Perfected Lord Yujun said deeply, I'll only emphasize on one thing. When Fairy Ling Long established the phenomenon ranking in the past, her intentions were not for humans to fight and kill one another. All of you must remember that. Indeed, the format of ascending the Myriad phenomenon peak would avoid a lot of needless bloodshed and injuries. That was the cleverness of Fairy Ling Long. In the chaotic ancient era, the death of a single paragon was an immense loss for the human race. When Perfected Lord Yujun said that, he swept his gaze across Su Zimo and Diin. His intentions were clear. Diin smirked coldly and snorted. In his heart, Su Zimo was not worthy to be named together with him by Perfected Lord Yujun. Fufu. On another cloud, Perfected Lord Hun Yi of Chaos Essence Sect chuckled softly. As you've mentioned, fellow Taoist Yujun, Fairy Ling Long established the phenomenon ranking for us humans. However, he paused briefly and changed the topic with a hint of killing intent. There seems to be a demon mixed in with our human cultivators below. There were many demon beasts below, but most of them were spirit beast mounts for the paragons and would not take part in the phenomenon ranking. It was obvious who Perfected Lord Hun Yi was referring to as the demon. He did not beat around the bush at all, and all the cultivators below heard everything loud and clear. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Countless gazes turned around, and instantly, many gazes were locked on Su Zimo. The pressure on him intensified. Perfected Lord Tianming of Zephyr Thunder Palace said coolly, Fellow Taoist Yujun, when did a beast gain the rights to take part in the phenomenon ranking? Amit Ba. Monk Wei Fu of Diamond Monastery chanted a Buddhist proclamation and said softly, if that is true, we must not let the demon take part in the fight for the phenomenon ranking. Monk Ju Qin of Diamond Monastery was defeated by Su Zimo 20 years ago, sowing a feud between them. The Purple Thunder Manual was in Su Zimo's hands, and Su Cheng of Zephyr Thunder Palace was even nearly killed. There was no way Zephyr Thunder Palace would let Su Zimo off. Now that the immortal sects, Chaos Essence Sect and Zephyr Thunder Palace, were not bothered to hide their intentions, Diamond Monastery seized the opportunity to join in. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. He was clearer than anyone about his body. He was a human. However, because he cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, there was an inner core in his chest. There was no way he could explain that. Previously, before Dai left, she did not wish for Su Zimo to continue cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. It was probably because she had anticipated something as such happening to him in the future. Perfected Lord Luo Shui frowned. She wanted to help Su Zimo, but if he had no way of explaining or proving this, there was nothing she could do about it. Little Fatty and the others were anxious internally. However, they did not even have the rights to speak regarding this matter. The situation would only get worse if they tried to explain it. Actually, it's really simple. Perfected Lord Beidou of Heavenly Dipper Sect smiled gently and said with an indifferent expression, since a demon has infiltrated the cultivators, all we have to do is kill it and everything will be settled. Although he said everything with a relaxed tone, it was shuddering. Little Fatty and the others felt their hearts skip a beat. At that moment, they finally realized that the super sects and major factions in Myriad Phenomenon City did not merely want to strip away Su Zimo's rights to partake in the phenomenon ranking. All of them wanted his life. The heavens cherish life. You are too deep in your desires to kill, fellow Taoists. Monk Yuan Kong of Hollow Monastery sighed gently. Buddhists are compassionate by nature. I've got a suggestion to make. Finally, a nascent soul was willing to speak up for Su Zimo. Little Fatty and the others were invigorated. Su Zimo was expressionless. He could not sense any benevolence in the eyes of the monk. Monk Yuan Kong continued, all lives are equal. Even if Patron Su is a demon, there's no need to take his life. Furthermore, he might have merely veered onto the wrong path. As long as he repents and lay down the butcher's knife, there's a chance he can return to the path of righteousness. Perfected Lord Tianming of Zephyr Thunder Palace asked with a fake smile, Reverend, how should he repent and lay down the butcher's knife? All Patron Su has to do is remove the inner core from his body. That will do, Monk Yuan Kong said with a smile. Little Fatty and the others were shocked when they heard that. Devious. Although Monk Yuan Kong seemed like he was speaking up for Su Zimo, he was even more venomous and savage. Removal of the inner core will definitely lead to severe injuries. Notwithstanding his inability to fight for the phenomenon ranking thereafter, how long could Su Zimo live for given that he was surrounded by enemies and cultivators that coveted his possessions? Hee. Perfected Lord Chuyu of Overlord Palace sneered and mocked. What a sanctimonious expression. Su Zimo's gaze was ice cold and he said nothing. The killing intent in his heart was already suppressed to its limits. It was impossible if they wanted to dig out his inner core. Little Fatty and the others were infuriated and cursed internally, but none of them dared to say anything. No matter what, they were against nascent souls. In Myriad Phenomenon City, nascent souls had absolute killing power. Reverend, you are wrong. Suddenly, a voice sounded from within the crowd. It caused an uproar like a rock that caused a tsunami. Everyone below were golden cores. Which golden core would dare to refute a nascent soul's words so tactlessly? Everyone turned towards the sound. A young monk walked forward from behind Su Zimo. It was Ming Zhen. Little Fatty and the others watched with widened eyes as their jaws almost fell to the ground. Even though they were displeased, they merely cursed in their hearts. However, Ming Zhen actually stood out and refuted Monk Yuan Kong in front of everyone. In reality, Little Fatty and the others did not know Ming Zhen well enough. Ming Zhen spent his days at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley away from the secular world and had a pure heart. To him, what was right and what was wrong was wrong. It did not matter what was the other person's identity, sect or faction. Be it nascent souls, void reversions or even Mahayana patriarchs, Ming Zhen would point out their errors. Reverend, if you want to remove Zimo's inner core, it is no longer pity but cruelty. Ming Zhen said deeply, lay down the butcher's knife and you shall become Buddha instantly. The intention of that saying is for people to lay down the knife in their hands and in their hearts as well. However, Reverend, your suggestion is not for the other party to lay down the butcher's knife, but to sever the arm which he wields the knife with. When you made that suggestion, the butcher's knife in your heart has already appeared in your hands. Perhaps you might not have been able to see it, but your appearance earlier on was frightening and menacing like a malevolent ghost. In Buddhism, we believe that you are what you think. Reverend, you've become a fiend. Bravo. Su Zimo lamented internally, secretly in awe. Every single word was perfect and pinpointed the flaws. Those words were like sharp swords that stabbed the Tao heart of Monk Yuan Kong. Even the dozens of nascent souls present were secretly amazed and looked fixedly at Ming Zhen at the bottom with bright eyes, let alone Su Zimo. Chapter 729, Dapamkara Monastery, Monk Yin Lu. Chapter 729, Dapamkara Monastery, Monk Yin Lu. The golden cores present were shocked at Ming Zhen's boldness in standing forth to refute nascent souls. Rather than refute, he was lecturing. He was lecturing a nascent soul as a golden core. However, the shock from perfected Lord Yujun and the others was because Ming Zhen's words contained supreme wisdom. A few accomplished monks of the Buddhist monasteries were stunned. Monk Yuan Kong's expression turned extremely grim. His cultivation and combat strength was far superior to Ming Zhen. However, an argument of words was a comparison of their understanding of the obscurities in Buddhism, a comparison between their wisdom and their enlightenment towards Buddhism and Zen. In that respect, Monk Yuan Kong had lost. He could not refute or argue against Ming Zhen's point at all. That was because in the depths of his heart, he was clear that he had truly harbored evil intentions and wanted to kill. Now that Ming Xian exposed him, even his Tao heart was shaken within a few sentences. Inexperienced young monk, even if you began cultivating in your mother's womb, how many sutras have you read? How many Zen mantras have you comprehended? Do you know what compassion and cruelty are? Do you know what is good and evil? Monk Yuan Kong's expression darkened as he shouted. In fact, Monk Yuan Kong used the power of Sanskrit from the Buddhist monasteries in that shout. Although it did not have the same might as the Daming True Sutra, he was a nascent soul after all, and there was even a fluctuation of dharmic power in the void that was shuddering. All the cultivators could sense that Monk Yuan Kong was truly angered. Caught off guard, Ming Zhen shuddered from the impact of the Sanskrit and his face turned pale. However, there was no fear in his bright eyes as he said word by word, There is no distinction between experience and learning. Those that arrive at the truth are the masters. His counter was truly impressive. Although it was merely 2 sentences, they poked at Monk Yuan Kong's weakness once more. If Little Fatty was the one who said it, that sentence would become, "Although you are old, Monk Yuan Kong, you've wasted your time living like a dog. Even I can be your master." The hearts of everyone in Su Zimo's group sank. Monk Yuan Kong was lectured by a golden core in front of everyone to a point where he was helpless to refute. He was completely disgraced. Right now he was on the verge of going berserk. Ming Zhen was bound to be killed with his rebuttal. "You have a death wish." Indeed, Monk Yuan Kong's eyes widened menacingly. Boom. Enraged, he extended his massive palm with outstretched fingers. Dermic powers surged in midair and a massive hand that blanketed the skies was formed. It crushed down towards Ming Zhen on the ground and the void quaked with a shuddering might. That was an attack of a nascent soul. The golden cores on the ground sensed a gigantic shadow shrouding over and instantly, there was a suffocating, immense pressure. If that was the case for the golden cores outside the area of effect, it was hard to imagine the type of pressure Ming Zhen was experiencing targeted by Monk Yuan Kong. Ming Zhen grunted dully and blood oozed from the corner of his lips. Apart from Monk Yuan Kong, there were 4 other perfected lords from the Buddhist monasteries in the air. However, the 4 of them were either expressionless, lowering their heads or ignoring everything. Although they knew that Monk Yuan Kong was bullying the other party out of his embarrassment, the other 4 perfected lords of the Buddhist monasteries had no intention of helping out. It was truly not a wise choice to offend Monk Yuan Kong for the sake of an unknown monk. They considered their own interests rather than what was right. That was also the most precious thing about Ming Zhen. This was an affair of the Buddhist monasteries. However, if even those of the Buddhist monasteries were sitting by idly, there was even less reason for the immortal and fiend sects to interfere. Furthermore, Ming Zhen was on Su Zimo's side. The nascent souls from the immortal sects were gloating over his misfortune internally. A green figure flashed past and shielded Ming Zhen, blocking half of the incoming pressure. Su Zimo raised his head slightly and his gaze was dazzling. Killing intent spewed wildly and his black hair danced as the blood chi in his body surged. His golden core spun wildly, he was fully prepared for a fight. There was no way he would sit by idly and watch Ming Zhen be suppressed, nor would he be captured without putting up a fight. Golden Core Phenomenon ranking, Ancient Phenomenon Stele, amazing rewards? He no longer wanted them nor could he be bothered as well. Since they were so overbearing, he would kill them with his might first. Perfected Lord Yujun frowned slightly. Just as he was about to raise his hand and stop things, he sensed something. His gaze landed not far away in the crowd and shone for a moment before he put down his hand once more. Amit Ba. A flare popped up in midair accompanied by a Buddhist proclamation and stopped the gigantic hand of dermic power from Monk Yuan Kong. Whoosh. Although the flare seemed so feeble that it could be extinguished by a casual gust of wind, it blazed instantly when it made contact with Monk Yuan Kong's dermic power palm. Crackle. The flare spread and burned with dermic power, surging into the skies. Monk Yuan Kong's expression changed starkly and he retracted his palm. Even so, he was a half-step slower and a spark landed on his sleeves, burning it into ashes instantly. The flames did not extinguish and continued blazing towards his arm. Monk Yuan Kong's eyes shone with a cold glint and he bit the tip of his tongue, spitting out a stream of essence blood. Extinguish. He hollered and the stream of essence blood exploded in midair, forming a grisly blood mist that poured down on his arm. Shing. The flames on his arm were extinguished with green smoke. Monk Yuan Kong let out a long breath of air. If he had reacted slower, his arm might have been gone. That split moment caused him to break out in cold sweat. Su Zimo suppressed the killing intent in his heart momentarily when he noticed what happened. It seemed like there was a chance for the situation to reverse from an irreconcilable state. The nascent souls in midair frowned when they looked at the flare hovering in midair. Clearly they knew the background of the flare and gazed around. Monk Yuan Kong came to his senses gradually and scanned the place, barking with a grim expression, "Monk Yin Lu, get out!" A young monk soared into the air from the dense crowd on the ground. Dapamkara Monastery. Little Fatty and the others pondered for a moment and recognized the sect badge on the waist of the middle-aged monk. Prior to this, only 5 of the 6 Buddhist monasteries had arrived. Dapamkara Monastery was missing. In the ancient battlefield 20 years ago, there was no successor of Dapamkara Monastery as well. Su Zimo's impression of the monastery was that it was extremely mysterious. Ji Qingtian whispered, "Monk Yin Lu of Dapamkara Monastery is rather famous in Tianhuang mainland and his strength is unfathomable. He is one of the top nascent souls and people refer to him as the monk that leads the way with a bright flame." Su Zimo nodded. The move Monk Yin Lu revealed earlier on was spectacular enough. Even Monk Yuan Kong suffered a slight loss from it. Monk Yin Lu came close to the flare and extended his finger to tap on it gently. As though it entered Monk Yin Lu's finger, that frightening flare vanished instantly. "Monk Yin Lu, what's the meaning of this?" Monk Yuan Kong remarked coldly, "Are you going to go against me because of this young monk?" Monk Yin Lu smiled gently. "Fellow Taoist Yuan Kong, this young friend was not wrong. Indeed, your appearance earlier on was detestable and menacing. My flame was not meant to burn you, but the fiend in your heart." Chapter 730 Joining Dapamkara. Chapter 730, Joining Dapamkara. Monk Yuan Kong looked terrible. On the clouds, Monk Wei Fu of Diamond Monastery asked indifferently, "Monk Yin Lu, there has never been a disciple of Dapamkara Monastery that inherited its legacy and took part in the phenomenon ranking in all these years. You guys are nothing but an embarrassment, so what are you doing all the way here at Myriad Phenomenon City?" "I'm here to select a disciple," Monk Yin Lu smiled gently. In Myriad Phenomenon City, any itinerant cultivator with a stellar performance would naturally be invited by the various super sects to join them. However, it was difficult for the Buddhist monasteries to accept disciples and their requirements were extremely stringent. There were extremely few people who cultivated Buddhism in Tianhuang mainland to begin with. Even less Buddhist cultivators could pass through the various obstacles and make their way here. Almost all of them came from the 6 Buddhist monasteries or the 108 upper sections. Hee. Monk Yuan Kong sneered, "Dapamkara Monastery is here to choose a disciple? How laughable. Who is going to join you guys?" Su Zimo was puzzled. No matter what, Dapamkara Monastery was one of the 6 Buddhist monasteries. As a super sect, they could also be considered as a place of pilgrimage for all Buddhist cultivators in the world. Why would nobody be willing to join them? Demonist Ji explained, "The cultivation techniques and secret skills of Dapamkara Monastery are famous for being difficult to comprehend. Many wise Buddhist cultivators that join Dapamkara Monastery end their lives without much of an accomplishment. Dapamkara Monastery has few disciples and is extremely isolated. Many monks spend their days sitting before the ancient Buddha accompanied by a green lantern all alone. That is something that most ordinary people cannot withstand." Suddenly, Su Zimo realized. It was no wonder why there were no legacy disciples of Dapamkara Monastery in the intermediate ancient battlefield as well as the elementary ancient battlefield 20 years ago. That was most likely the most important reason. Of course. Demonist Ji continued, "While the cultivation techniques of Dapamkara Monastery are obscure and cultivating them is almost impossible, if one manages to obtain the legacy, they become extremely powerful. It's no exaggeration to say that they will be supreme across the Buddhist monasteries." Monk Yin Lu was not troubled by Monk Yuan Kong's ridicules and merely snapped his finger with a chuckle. "I've already selected a candidate. Young friend, if you don't mind, you can join Dapamkara Monastery for your cultivation." Monk Yin Lu was pointing towards Ming Zhen. Monk Yuan Kong sneered mockingly, "This young monk has a glib tongue and is only good at talking. How strong can he be? Can he even obtain a spot on the phenomenon ranking? His capabilities and strength are not important." Monk Yin Lu shook his head. "He has wisdom and a deep understanding and comprehension towards the teachings of Buddhism, that alone is enough. Furthermore, it's not a bad thing to have a glib tongue. Legend has it that Buddha was able to spit out lotuses while speaking. In fact, flowers will rain from the skies and the floor will be filled with golden lotuses with countless Buddhas appearing through the air. How can this dirty-mouthed kid be compared to Buddha? How laughable. In the long run, Dapamkara Monastery's legacy is going to be lost." Monk Wei Fu shook his head. The other cultivators looked on with mocking expressions as well. In their opinions, although Ming Zhen was good with his words and had a deep comprehension towards the teachings of Buddhism, what use was that? It wasn't as though he could subdue his opponents just by relying on his mouth. At the end of the day, overwhelming capabilities were required to subdue evil and fiends. Dian was the only one in the endless crowd that frowned. While the others did not know of Ming Zhen's background, he knew. "Young friend, are you willing?" Monk Yinlu was not bothered by the gazes of outsiders and merely looked at Ming Zhen, asking with a smile. Ming Zhen was a little lost and looked at Su Zimo beside him instinctively. Su Zimo mulled for a moment before nodding. Although the cultivation environment of Dapamkara Monastery was somewhat boring, it was nothing to Ming Zhen. If Ming Zhen could adapt to life at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, he would naturally feel at home in the cultivation environment of Dapamkara Monastery. For Ming Zhen, the difficulty of the obscure cultivation techniques of Dapamkara Monastery might not be much of a problem. Up till this point of his cultivation, all he studied were the ancient books and true sutras of Daming and Fahua monasteries. His foundation was something that no other Buddhist cultivator could compare against. Furthermore, Ming Zhen was guided by the mysterious old monk at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. Of course, most importantly, it was the attitude of Monk Yinlu towards Ming Zhen. In that situation earlier when Monk Yuan Kong was clearly bullying a junior, the other 4 Buddhist monasteries chose to ignore everything. However, Monk Yinlu of Dapamkara Monastery chose to make a move. Ming Zhen took a deep breath, nodded and bowed to Monk Yinlu. "I am Ming Zhen and I'm humbled by your graciousness, senior. I am willing to join Dapamkara Monastery." Well. Monk Yinlu repeated 3 times in satisfaction. Perfected Lord Yujun raised his head slightly as well. "Congratulations, fellow Taoist. Please take your seat." He raised his hand gently and a wisp of mist flew out from his robes, pausing in front of Monk Yinlu before forming a white, flawless cloud. Monk Yuan Kong ridiculed, "Let's see what name this young monk, Ming Zhen, can make of himself in Tianhuang mainland in the future." Piak. Suddenly, Perfected Lord Hun Yi clapped and said slowly, "Everyone, the phenomenon ranking is about to begin. Let's settle this demon before us first." "That's right." Perfected Lord Tianming of Zephyr Thunder Palace said coldly as well, "We'll kill this lad first and talk about anything else later." "That's right." The Perfected Lords of Heavenly Dipper Sect, Clear Wind Temple, Hollow Monastery, Purple Firmament Sect and many other immortal and Buddhist sects nodded in agreement as they discussed. The 2 Perfected Lords of the Fiend sects remained silent. Although both of them were not on the side of the immortal and Buddhist Perfected Lords' behaviors, they would not go against everyone for the sake of Su Zimo. Monk Yinlu frowned slightly. There was nothing he could do about this as well. After all, even he was unsure whether Su Zimo was a human or demon. Su Zimo might have a shot at survival if he could prove himself to be human. If not, he might not be able to get out of this predicament. Su Zimo had a cold gaze and his palm moved slowly towards his storage bag. "Don't be reckless." Suddenly, a voice sounded in Su Zimo's mind. Lin Xuanji had arrived beside him unknowingly. "It's not at that stage yet. This is the Myriad Phenomenon City and the Phenomenon ranking is hosted by Enigma Palace. The decision is not up to outsiders." Lin Xuanji shook his head gently and stopped Su Zimo with his gaze. Right then, Perfected Lord Yujun surveyed his surroundings and said slowly, "If you're going to kill every single demon, are you going to the large number of spirit demons below?" Perfected Lord Luo Shui let out a deep breath. Perfected Lord Yujun of Enigma Palace was probably the only one who could salvage the current situation. Perfected Lord Hun Yi and the others frowned. Things would certainly be troublesome if Enigma Palace chose to stand by Su Zimo. On the one hand, it was because of Enigma Palace's special status. On the other hand, it was Perfected Lord Yujun himself. Although cultivators of Enigma Palace rarely took part in the strifes of the cultivation world, nobody dared look down on them. How is that comparable? Monk Yuan Kong said deeply, "The demons below are all spirit beasts reared by our disciples and will not partake in the fight for the phenomenon ranking personally." "That's right. Although this lad is a demon, he wishes to partake in the fight for the phenomenon ranking. This means that he's coveting the treasures of humans, so that's reason enough for us to kill him." Perfected Lord Tianming of Zephyr Thunder Palace said murderously. Perfected Lord Hun Yi shouted with a bright gaze, "Perfected Lord Yujun, are you trying to stand on the side of a demon in broad daylight and pit yourself against humans? Are you going to betray our race and be a sinner of Enigma Palace?" Chapter 731 Famous Overnight. Chapter 731, famous overnight. It was a merciless accusation of betraying humans. Monk Yin Lu sighed gently. That was what he was worried about. If he had stood out earlier on, he would have received the same accusation. Neither he nor Dapamkara Monastery could afford an accusation as such. However, Perfected Lord Yujun was expressionless and composed against the pressure and questioning of the other Perfected Lords. Enigma Palace had a special status and possessed the confidence of not being affiliated with the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects. How do you know he's a demon? Perfected Lord Yujun asked in reverse. He has an inner core and demonic chi will spread the moment he channels it. What else is he if not a demon? Perfected Lord Tianming remarked coldly. Perfected Lord Yujun asked again. He has a golden core that spreads spirit energy the moment he channels it, and he has a double phenomenon as well. Does that not make him a cultivator? Perfected Lord Tianming was momentarily speechless. Monk Wei Fu pondered for a moment. If we're uncertain, let's cancel his rights to partake in the fight for the phenomenon ranking first. Yes, that works too. Perfected Lord Beidou nodded. At that point, Su Zimo sneered internally. Those people wanted to strip him of his rights to partake in the phenomenon ranking as a second-best option after realizing that Perfected Lord Yujun would not yield. Perfected Lord Yujun said indifferently, "There's no need for that. Since nobody is sure whether this lad is a human or demon, we'll let the Myriad phenomenon peak tell us the answer." What do you mean? Perfected Lord Hun Yi frowned. Perfected Lord Yujun pointed to the Myriad phenomenon peak. This mountain possesses dermic power imbued by fairy Ling Long that lasts forever. If someone of another race tries to ascend the Myriad phenomenon peak and challenge fairy Ling Long's authority, they will definitely be killed mercilessly. If he's a human, he will naturally have the rights to ascend the Myriad phenomenon peak. If he's a demon, he has no one to blame if he's killed by the dermic power left behind by fairy Ling Long. Although his words were harsh, Su Zimo could tell that Perfected Lord Yujun was helping him. What he implied was that if the other Perfected Lords had any more qualms, they would not be challenging Perfected Lord Yujun or Enigma Palace, but fairy Ling Long herself. True enough. Perfected Lord Hun Yi snorted. The expressions of Perfected Lord Tianming and the others turned grim as they exchanged glances and no longer spoke. The short conflict between the nascent souls was tense, and many golden cores below watched nervously while breaking out in cold sweat. Unexpectedly, the predicament posed by the combined forces of many immortal and Buddhist sects almost came to fruition, and Su Zimo was almost killed, but everything was resolved by a few comments from Perfected Lord Yujun. Su Zimo felt relieved, and the killing intent in his eyes dissipated as well. You've got to watch out if you want to ascend the Myriad phenomenon peak. No matter what, you must not make use of the power of your inner core and release any demonic chi. A single wisp will cause you to be killed by the Myriad phenomenon peak. Suddenly that sentence sounded in Su Zimo's mind. It was Perfected Lord Yujun using his spirit consciousness to remind Su Zimo out of goodwill, and outsiders could not hear it at all. Su Zimo glanced at Perfected Lord Yujun with a grateful expression. If Perfected Lord Yujun had not stood out earlier on, he might have already attacked. Thank you. He glanced at Lin Xuanji beside him and expressed his thanks softly. Perfected Lord Yujun was a stranger to him, and his only connection to Enigma Palace was Lin Xuanji. Su Zimo knew that Lin Xuanji was definitely the reason why Perfected Lord Yujun helped him. Unexpectedly, Lin Xuanji shook his head. It's not only because of me. Don't forget, you were acknowledged by the Human Emperor's palace. Enigma Palace will definitely help you with that fact alone. Suddenly Su Zimo was enlightened. The Human Emperor was the Tao companion of fairy Ling Long. The acknowledgement of the Human Emperor's palace was equivalent to the acknowledgement of Enigma Palace. Karma was truly something that worked in mysterious ways. Let the elimination battle of the Golden Core phenomenon ranking officially begin. Suddenly, Perfected Lord Yujun's voice sounded once more and reverberated through every single corner of Myriad Phenomenon City. Boom. The crowd broke into an uproar. The cultivators partaking in the phenomenon ranking were naturally immensely excited. Even the cultivators who were merely watching were in high spirits and emotional. The phenomenon ranking this time round was going to be unusually intense. Today, thousands of golden core phenomenons were going to be clashing intensely. Many lost ancient phenomenons would reappear and light up the voids, clashing against one another with an endless brilliance. How spectacular would that be? It was a grand occasion for cultivators that was once in a lifetime. Today, the most frightening and talented people in Tianhuang mainland with the greatest potential would be selected. These were the people who had a high chance of attaining the title of Dao Lords and mighty figures in the future. Some of them might even be referred to as emperors in the future. He. Rin Tu of Azura sect let out a creepy laughter and said coolly, "Let's see how strong are the other paragons." Clang, clang. A series of sword buzzes echoed from around Hang Chiyu jarringly. "I love grand occasions as such. Let's fight." Pang Yu of Overlord Palace smacked his lips with a blazing fighting spirit. "Amit Ba, here I come." Monk Ju Qin of Diamond Monastery exclaimed a Buddhist proclamation and sped towards the Myriad phenomenon peak in a flash. Monk Jian Kong, Dugu Jian, Su Qing, Duan Qingping, Wu Feng and everyone else moved one after another as well. Di glared at Su Zimo and smirked coldly before disappearing in a flash. Ji Qingtian said, "Let's go too." "All right." Su Zimo nodded. In their group, Lin Xuanji was a cultivator of Enigma Palace and would naturally not partake in the fight for the phenomenon ranking. Although Shi Jian was a legacy disciple of Puppet Sect, his capabilities relied entirely on his puppets and he had no golden core phenomenon of his own. As such, he was not going to take part as well. Xiaoning and Leng Ro were legacy disciples of Elixir Yang Sect and Thousand Crane Sect. While both of them cultivated golden core phenomenons, they knew that they had no shot at the phenomenon ranking and chose to merely watch by the sidelines. Ming Zhen, Ji Qingtian and Little Fatty were the only ones remaining who chose to take part in the phenomenon ranking. In midair, Monk Yuan Kong was slightly surprised when he noticed that and chuckled. "Monk Yin Lu, that amazing disciple you've just taken in is going to attempt and ascend the Myriad phenomenon peak. Interesting." Monk Wei Fu remarked indifferently, "He must have cultivated a nonsensical golden core phenomenon and thought that he's able to fight for the phenomenon ranking. In reality, he's just there to make a fool of himself. I estimate that he will probably not go further than the second stone step," Monk Yuan Kong said. The nascent souls chuckled and were waiting to watch the show. Monk Yin Lu was not bothered nor troubled by their mocking. He merely gazed at Monk Yin Lu with a faint smile and instructed, "There's no need for any pressure, just try your best. It's fine even if you fail, a single ranking list won't determine your future." "Yes." Ming Zhen nodded. Su Zimo shook his head gently with a faint smile. He was clearer than everyone else about Ming Zhen's strength. Monk Yuan Kong said that he wanted to see if Ming Zhen could make a name for himself in Tianhuang mainland in the future. There was no need for the future. It was going to happen here and now. Ming Zhen, that unassuming young monk, was going to shock the world and become famous overnight. Chapter 732 4 Distinct Groups. Chapter 732, 4 Distinct Groups. Sh. Figures flew towards the Myriad phenomenon peak one after another. There were at least 100,000 paragons who partook in the phenomenon ranking this time round and they were clumped together in a spectacular sight. However, many people were sent flying by the power of the Myriad phenomenon peak the moment they stepped foot on the first stone step. It was even more spectacular watching the pathetic figures fly off one after another. Exclamations could be heard everywhere. The crowd was in an uproar. Above the clouds, the nascent souls shook their heads and chuckled. During each fight for the phenomenon ranking, there would always be cultivators that refused to heed warnings and attempt to ascend the Myriad phenomenon peak, only to meet with the same outcome. Ancient emperors have left their marks and auras on the Myriad phenomenon peak. It was not so easy to ascend it. In less than 15 minutes, more than half of the 100,000 paragons were eliminated. That was the elimination battle. It was most efficient in eliminating weak cultivators. As for the cultivators that ascended the Myriad phenomenon peak, the situation was different for each of them as well. Some of them were drenched in sweat, clearly under immense pressure. Some of them swayed as though they could be sent flying at any moment. Some of them could not withstand it and released their golden core phenomenons right away. Instantly, the power of phenomenons surged one after another on the Myriad phenomenon peak. The spirit energy in the surroundings was already boiling. Some of them were resplendent, some was bedazzling, some moved the flora while some possessed the endless oceans and bright moon. Countless golden core phenomenons appeared at the same time in a breathtaking manner. Of course, everyone was clear that the cultivators who summoned their golden core phenomenons were the weak ones who could not endure the power of the Myriad phenomenon peak. The top paragons of the Golden Core realm would not even need to use their Golden Core phenomenons to reach the lowest stone step on the Myriad phenomenon peak. They could ascend just by relying on their bodies, bloodline and spirit energies. A soft exclamation could be heard above the clouds. Monk Yuan Kong was initially waiting to see Ming Zhen make a fool of himself. Unexpectedly, Ming Zhen made it to the second stone step with ease and he was not slowing down at all. That alone was proof that Ming Zhen was much stronger than more than half of the cultivators present. I'm sorry to have disappointed you. Monk Yin Lu smiled gently. Initially he thought that Ming Zhen would stop at the first stone step as well. To think that Ming Zhen would provide him a pleasant surprise. Monk Yuan Kong harumphed coldly. That's nothing much. There's more than 10,000 cultivators remaining on the Monk Yuan Kong. We'll see if he can make it to the top 108. The Myriad phenomenon peak was 108,000 feet tall and had a total of 108 stone steps. The gap between each stone step was 1,000 feet. It was extremely difficult to get from one stone step to the other. The closer one was to the peak, the greater the pressure on them. In less than an hour, there were only slightly more than 10,000 cultivators remaining on the Myriad phenomenon peak. Of the 10,000 cultivators, the gap between them increased as well and they were divided into distinct groups. Unsurprisingly, the leader was the number one perfected being, Diyin. The way Diyin ascended the Myriad phenomenon peak brought forth exclamations. He did not have to step on the stone steps of the Myriad phenomenon peak to push himself up. Instead, he soared into the air and sped upwards at an extremely fast speed, leaving all the other cultivators behind. It seemed as though the power resisting from the peak had no impact on Diyin at all. Apart from Diyin, the actual first group comprised of 8 people: Ren Tu of Azura sect, Su Cheng of Zephyr Thunder Palace, Monk Jian Kong of Hollow Monastery, Dugu Jian, Hang Chuyu of Sword Sect, Pang Yu of Overlord Palace, Monk Ju Chen of Diamond Monastery and Ming Zhen. Many cultivators were shocked at that outcome. Everyone expected Ren Tu, Su Cheng, Monk Jian Kong, Hang Chuyu, Pang Yu and Monk Ju Chen to be in the first team since they were all top-tier peerless paragons. What nobody expected was for 2 unknown cultivators to make their way into the group and followed closely without any signs of falling off. One of them was Dugu Jian from a cultivation gentry clan of the North region. Sword cultivators were a special type of cultivator and were known for their frightening killing strength. Sword sect was considered as a place of pilgrimage for all sword cultivators. The fact that a sword cultivator from out of nowhere was able to keep pace with a legacy disciple of sword sect was cause for commotion. On the Myriad phenomenon peak, Hang Chuyu had an extremely sharp gaze and he glanced at Dugu Jian from time to time. However, Dugu Jian was oblivious to it, merely advancing in silence while looking down at the long sword in his hands. Ming Zhen was the other one that everyone was surprised to see. Nobody expected him to be able to keep pace with 2 of the strongest paragons of the Buddhist monasteries. Furthermore, Ming Zhen looked energetic and showed no signs of exhaustion. Monk Yuan Kong looked terrible. More than obtaining a spot on the phenomenon ranking. This person had a high chance of making it into the top 10. Congratulations for taking in a talent, Dapamkara Monastery. Perfected Lord Luo Shui smiled gently and congratulated with cupped fists. Monk Yin Lu smiled. Even with his composure, he could barely contain the joy in his eyes. Dapamkara Monastery sure has good fortune, coming all the way to Myriad Phenomenon City to gain a freebie, the perfected Lord of Clearheart Nunnery said with a salty tone. By then, the disciple of Clearheart Nunnery had already fallen off to the third group. She was naturally disgruntled. Monk Wei Fu raised his brow gently. It does not matter even if he makes it to the first group for the time being. Later on, he'll have to rely on his golden core phenomenon to continue forward against the pressure no matter what. That's right. Monk Yuan Kong added, without a strong golden core phenomenon to support him, everything that happens now is merely fleeting. Monk Yin Lu did not refute. However, he deeply anticipated deep in his heart what Ming Zhen's golden core phenomenon would look like. There were clearly more cultivators in the second group. Demoness Ji of Pure Maiden Sect, Little Fatty of Tomb Sect, Duan Qingping of Clear Wind Temple, Wu Feng of Purple Firmament Sect, Ling Han of Snowdrift Valley, Nie Hao of Chaos Essence Sect and Qin Li of Illusion Fiend Cult. There were around 30 people. There were even more people in the third group, more than 100. Cultivators of the first two groups had yet to release their golden core phenomenons. However, cultivators in the third group were already getting slower in their ascension speed and showed signs of exhaustion. Some cultivators could not endure it and already released their golden core phenomenons. Jiqingtian was in the third group. The cultivators at the back were considered to be in the fourth group and there were hundreds of them. However, they were scattered and cultivators were repelled away from the Myriad phenomenon peak from time to time. These people were at the bottom of the Myriad phenomenon peak and almost had no chance of obtaining a spot on the phenomenon ranking. The cultivators who could leave their names on the phenomenon ranking were almost determined by now. It was between the cultivators in the first three groups. The eventual ranking would be decided after the ascension of the Myriad phenomenon peak was over to see which cultivators managed to ascend the most steps. The closer they were at the peak, the further front their ranking on the phenomenon ranking would be. Where is Su Zimo? He has a double phenomenon and even defeated Su Cheng of Zephyr Thunder Palace. He should be in the first group, but why don't I see him? A series of discussions broke out from the crowd. Look, he's there. All the cultivators looked around and before long, they found out that Su Zimo was in the fourth group. He looked unassuming mixed in with the crowd. How could this be? Could he really be suppressed because of his inner core? Fufu, he asked for this. It's his own fault. Among the crowd, some people sneered while others were worried. Lin Xuanji squinted his eyes for a moment before exclaiming softly as he noticed something odd. Chapter 733 Perfected. Chapter 733, Perfected. Indeed, Su Zimo was in the fourth group. However, unlike other cultivators in the fourth group, Su Zimo's aura was stable and he looked calm, as though he was not under any pressure. The reason why Su Zimo was relegated to the fourth group was because each time he climbed a stone step, he would linger for a long time in deep thoughts. He would only move on to the next stone step after a while. What is he doing? Lin Xuanji rubbed his chin, puzzled. He was not the only one, even the nascent souls on the clouds could not read Su Zimo's movements. Nobody knew that while Su Zimo was contending against the pressure of the Myriad phenomenon peak, he was comprehending it as well. The Myriad phenomenon peak had existed for countless years. Almost all the powerful golden core phenomenons in history had left their marks and auras here. That included phenomenons from the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects. Su Zimo was not at the impossible level such that he could comprehend the essence of those phenomenons just relying on that. However, by experiencing the marks and auras left behind by the golden core phenomenons, he deepened his understanding on the Taoists of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects. A golden core phenomenon was the epitome of all spirit arts. It contained a cultivator's understanding from the chi condensation to golden core realm. A phenomenon was only born by combining them and evolving from that point. By comprehending those golden core phenomenons, Su Zimo's golden core also grew fuller and the three different auras of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects that shrouded his golden core grew brighter. The golden core swiveled slowly, fusing fire and water, yin and yang, and turned flawless and pure. It was as though it was harmonizing with heaven and earth and the sun and moon through all eternity. That was a true golden core. That was the true perfected state. It was an irreplaceable and precious experience. Since Su Zimo wanted to establish a Tao, this was an opportunity he could not miss. How difficult was it to establish a Tao? Up till this point, Su Zimo had no clue on how he should start. Perhaps the only way for him to identify an alternate path of cultivation available for mortals was by comprehending the obscurities of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects while experiencing the mysteriousness of the demon Tao. Each time he ascended a stone step, the aura of a different golden core phenomenon would surge towards him. Su Zimo closed his eyes and experienced everything carefully. The other cultivators ascended the Myriad phenomenon peak for the sake of fame. However, at that moment, Su Zimo was already beyond the point of fame when he stood on the Myriad phenomenon peak. In his eyes, there was only all the living beings in the world. In his chest, there was only the boundless heaven and earth. In his heart, there was a greater ambition. Most of the cultivators in the fourth group could only give up one after another when they saw that it was hopeless. Su Zimo was the only one that continued in silence. The cultivators in the third group could not endure it any longer and released their golden core phenomenons one after another. Gradually, an outcome was determined among the 100-odd people of the third group. Jiqingtian released the legacy phenomenon of ethereal peak and stopped at the 25th stone step. He was drenched in sweat and completely exhausted. That was his limit. Some of the cultivators stopped at the 20th stone step while there were some at the 26th, 27th. There were almost 1 or 2 people on every stone step up above. Thankfully there was no one else at the stone step Jiqingtian was on. That way he could avoid a grueling fight after the elimination battle. Can you make it up another step? Suddenly, a voice sounded beside Jiqingtian's ears. He turned over and saw Su Zimo land on the 25th stone step with a single leap, standing beside him. I can't make it anymore, I'm at my limits. Jiqingtian wiped away the sweat on his forehead and panted slightly while smiling. Junior brother Su, don't worry about me. Continue advancing. Yes. Su Zimo nodded. Given Jiqingtian's spot, he should be ranked around 100 on the phenomenon ranking if nothing went wrong. Although it did not seem high for Jiqingtian, or rather for Ethereal Peak's legacy phenomenon, Ethereal Sword, it was already the best result. There were only 108 spots on the phenomenon ranking. Any cultivator that could obtain a spot was already a true paragon of the era. At that moment, Dean was already at the 99th stone step. This was where he stopped 100 years ago. Now that he had returned, his aura was forceful. He did not stop on the 99th stone step and soared through the air before landing on the 100th stone step. Dean had cast everyone far behind. Although the 8 people in the first group were still traveling side by side, none of them summoned their golden core phenomenons yet. However, the difference between them could gradually be seen as well as they rose higher. Overlord Palace and Diamond Monastery were super sects well known for body tempering. Pang Yu and Monk Ju Chen had robust bloodlines and their breathings were steady. Although they did not summon their golden core phenomenon, they looked comparatively relaxed. The difference in physique was clear between them and Ren Tu of Azura sect, Monk Jian Kong of Hollow Monastery, Su Cheng of Zephyr Thunder Palace and the others. Some of them had hurried breathings. Some of them had sweat on their foreheads. Once again, everyone was surprised that Ming Zhen was not inferior to Pang Yu and Monk Ju Chen in terms of physique. Ming Zhen's expression was smooth as jade and he did not sweat at all. His breathing was still steady, it was clear that he was not at his limits. What's the background of that young monk? What cultivation technique did he cultivate? Monk Wei Fu frowned slightly. He must have had some encounters and opportunities. Perfected Lord Beidou said deeply, it's still too early to come to a conclusion. Eventually, the rankings between the few of them are determined by their golden core phenomenons and how much power they can release. Even so, all the nascent souls present were clear that even if Ming Zhen's golden core phenomenon was weak, he would make it to the top 20 at least. That was already relatively frightening. Even legacy disciples of the various super sects might not be able to make it to the top 20. For example, the legacy disciple of Clearheart Nunnery and Shangguan Yu of Cloud Rain sect were already relegated to the third group. In the second group, some cultivators could not withstand it any longer and released their golden core phenomenons as well. Little Fatty was still holding on. If he had not undergone the baptism with the wisp of Yellow Springs fog within the astral dragon sputum lair, he would have been left behind a long time ago. Rise! The paragon of Soaring Feather sect shouted softly. The sound of water rushing rapidly and tides surging could be heard behind him, causing ripples to splash. A blood-red sun was setting slowly on that long river. The evening sun dyed the skies red in a tragically beautiful scene. Even the river surface was stained red and transformed into a blood river with a torrential blood stench. Look, that's the legacy phenomenon of Soaring Feather sect. The ancient phenomenon, Long River Sunset. A series of exclamations came from the crowd. With the boost of his golden core phenomenon, the paragon of Soaring Feather sect was invigorated. He looked much more relaxed as his speed increased and he sprinted up the peak. Galaxy Vortex. The paragon of Heavenly Dipper sect could not withstand it any longer and released his golden core phenomenon as well. Night descended instantly. The skies above his head were lined with stars that sparkled in a bedazzling manner. All of a sudden, it was as though there was a magnetic force. The stars that filled the skies began swiveling into a gigantic vortex. Countless stars collided and sparks flew everywhere, releasing a shuddering energy fluctuation. The center of the vortex seemed as though it could destroy everything. The paragon of Heavenly Dipper sect howled deeply and his speed exploded. The other paragons of the second group released their golden core phenomenons one after another. Instantly, many ancient phenomenons flashed through the voids in a shocking manner. Chapter 734, Nature Reversion. Chapter 734, Nature Reversion. All the cultivators in the vicinity of the Myriad phenomenon peak felt their blood pump at the sight of that. This was the only opportunity to witness the clash between many ancient phenomenons. Although there were millions of cultivators in the cultivation world, only the 100,000 of them that were in Myriad Phenomenon City would get the opportunity to witness this. Look, that's my formless monastery's legacy ancient phenomenon, the Bodhi Tree Shadow. Senior brother Yong Ren will definitely be able to make it to the first group under that Bodhi tree. Senior sister Ling released her golden core phenomenon as well. The temperature around Ling Han of Snowdrift Valley dipped and sparkling, crystallized snowflakes fell one after another from the skies. Although the snowflakes looked weak, each of them possessed frightening killing power. The ancient phenomenon, omnidirectional snowstorm. The pressure on the cultivators of the second group was reduced immensely after they released their golden core phenomenons and their speeds gradually increased. However, things were clearer for the 17 nascent souls on the clouds. Although the paragons of the second group released many ancient phenomenons, it was still relatively difficult for them to catch up to the 8 people of the first group. It was true that those paragons were able to leap through several stone steps easily with the use of their golden core phenomenons. However, the pressure would only increase as they got closer to the peak. Before long, the paragons of the second group would slow down again. Furthermore, the 8 people of the first group had yet to release their golden core phenomenons. The moment the 8 of them released their golden core phenomenons, the gap between them and the cultivators of the second group would open up once more. Rise! Wu Feng of Purple Firmament sect shouted and channeled his golden core to its limits. A scarlet glow enveloped his face and it gradually turned purple. In the blink of an eye, his face was covered by a purple glow. All of a sudden, a purple chi floated over from the east and enveloped Wu Feng's body. Behind him was a faint figure of an elderly figure with gray beard and hair riding on a bull. Although his appearance was blurry, he released a boundless might. The ancient phenomenon Eastern Purple Chi. Purple Chi was the chi of a venerable and was incomparably noble. Wu Feng's aura exploded along with his speed as he dashed towards the first group. Humph! A cold glint flashed through the eyes of the paragon of Malevolent Earth sect as he shouted, unwilling to be left behind. A boundless malevolent chi spread around him and rumbled. In the blink of an eye, it transformed into a gigantic scythe. The scythe was black as ink and resembled a fearsome weapon from deep in the 9 hells that could reap all life. The ancient phenomenon, Malevolent Earth Scythe. Whoosh! The paragon of Malevolent Earth sect pointed forward. The gigantic Malevolent Earth Scythe cut a pitch-black arc in midair, as though it could cleave the void into 2. The paragon of Malevolent Earth sect sprinted along the arc that was ripped. Amit Ba. The paragon of Wisdom Monastery chanted a Buddhist proclamation and his eyes shone with the light of wisdom. He conjured a unique dermic seal with his hands and the power of phenomenon around him surged. Gradually, mysterious halos of light began appearing behind him, emanating a flawless saint glow. The glow shone down on the world as though it could purify all living beings. The ancient phenomenon, boundless Buddha light. Paragons that could reach this level were all prideful. All of them wanted to advance further and were not willing to fall behind others. However, the 8 in the first group were still far ahead in the lead. Gradually, as time passed by and everyone got closer to the peak, the speed of Little Fatty, Demoness Ji, Ling Han, Wu Feng and the others in the second group decreased as they showed signs of exhaustion. Before long, almost all the cultivators in the second group were at their limits. They scattered and stood on different stone steps, unable to advance further. Hurry, look. There are 2 paragons on the same step. That's right. By the looks of it, there will be a grueling battle after the elimination battle. There were 2 people on the 78 stone step. One of them was Demoness Ji and the other was Duan Qingping of Clear Wind Temple. Both of them panted and were exhausted. Duan Qingping's gaze roamed around Demoness Ji's body wantonly and he gave an evil smile. Fiend Maiden, You sure are unlucky to bump into me. Is that so? Demonish G snickered. If that's the case, please be gentler later on, fellow Taoist. Don't worry. Duan Qingping replied lustfully, I'll definitely be gentle with you. Although Duan Qingping sounded flirtatious and he had an intoxicated expression as though he was charmed, the depths of his eyes shone with a cold glint. There were two other people in the second group that stood on the same stone step. One of them was Little Fatty and the other was Qinli of Illusion Fiend Cult. The both of them exchanged glances. Qinli laughed sinisterly. He used his hand to slice across his own throat with a gesture and did not conceal the killing intent in his eyes at all. Little Fatty pouted and reared his head to look upwards. In reality he had strength remaining, but he was not confident of ascending another stone step. Furthermore, the Paragon of Wisdom Monastery stood on the next stone step. If he failed to ascend further and ended up severely injured by the power of the Myriad Phenomenon Peak, it would be extremely embarrassing. Little Fatty pondered for a moment but chose not to advance. That's interesting, we'll be able to see two fights between paragons at the very least. That's right, things will be much bloodier in a battle between the paragons. I heard that in paragons in previous ranking battles bled and it wasn't rare for them to die on the spot as well. That's only natural. All of these paragons are prideful and none of them would bow down to the other. It's only normal for them to fight to the death, especially if their sex had feuds to begin with. The cultivators watching discussed heatedly with excited faces. Naturally, all of them wanted to witness more ranking battles. The positions of the paragons in the second group are almost fixed and there won't be much changes to the rankings anymore. Yes, the outcome has basically been decided. Suddenly, someone exclaimed and pointed to the Myriad Phenomenon Peak in shock. Hurry, look. There's someone there. That's Suzimo. Everyone was drawn into the 8 people in the first group and the countless ancient phenomenons in the second group. They had almost forgotten about Suzimo, who was taking his time down below. Something isn't right. He seems to be faster than before. Indeed, he has gotten much faster. How could this be? Normally, the pressure experienced by a cultivator increased the closer they were to the peak. As such, they would naturally slow down as well. However, none of the cultivators present could figure out why Suzimo's speed increased instead, as though he could not feel the pressure from the mountain. What those cultivators did not know was that Suzimo was already at perfected golden core realm. He was at a new level of understanding towards his core. He had already comprehended most of the marks and auras left behind by the ancient phenomenons on Myriad Phenomenon Peak, and there were not many remaining. Furthermore, his speed of comprehension increased as he advanced as well. Within a short period of time, he could experience the obscurities and mysteriousness of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend Daos behind their phenomenons. The aura around Suzimo became increasingly pure. It was as though he had reverted to the state of resonating with nature. The 17 nascent souls on the clouds felt their hearts skip a beat when they sensed the change in Suzimo. All of their eyes shone brightly with looks of disbelief. Chapter 735 World Cleansing Green Lotus. Chapter 735 World Cleansing Green Lotus. What was the point of cultivating? It was to remove the facade of things and revert to the origin of nature. That was also the reason why cultivators of the Golden Core realm were referred to as perfected beings. However, throughout history, there have been too few cultivators who were able to understand that level of wisdom. It was a process of comprehension to obtain the truth and break free from the restraints of heaven and earth. By removing the facades and reverting to the true self, one is free from the struggles of life and death. Anybody that could comprehend that possessed supreme wisdom. At that moment, Suzimo was passing through an ancient path along the marks left behind by his predecessors. Eventually, he allowed the distinct auras of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend Daos in his heart to harmonize with his golden core perfectly and arrived at the realm of reverting to nature. It seems like a golden era has truly arrived in Tianhuang mainland. Monk Yin Lu lamented emotionally, it's extremely rare for a monster incarnate that has such immense fortune and wisdom to appear. To think that 2 of them would be born consecutively in this era. Seems like Dean has a match. Fu. Perfected Lord Hun Yi chuckled proudly with disdain in his eyes as he shook his head. Indeed, that lad has great wisdom and fortune. However, he's far from comparable to Dean. We'll talk about that when he can catch up to Dean's footsteps. Right now, he isn't qualified to be compared with Dean. Monk Lu did not reply. That was because Dean was already at the peak at that moment. On the peak, Dean stood with his hands behind his back. His figure was faintly visible through the clouds and he emanated an unparalleled dominance as he looked down on all other cultivators. Dean was going to leave his name on the ancient phenomenon Stele. He was the true number one perfected being. He was also the first to do so in 1,000 years. Although the 17 nascent souls present were once top cultivators that dominated in their time, none of them were able to accomplish this feat. Dean shifted his gaze. When he saw Su Zimo who was advancing from the back, he could not help but snort coldly. Clang, clang. Finally, someone in the first group could not withstand the pressure and released a golden core phenomenon. The sound of swords buzzing reverberated relentlessly through the world. A series of chilling sword lights appeared behind Dugujian. They blanketed the skies densely and tore through air. Heavenly encompassing swords. It was a golden core phenomenon of the Tao of the sword and was created by a mighty figure of the ancient era. It was ranked 41 on the previous phenomenon ranking. To think that it would possess such might when it was released by Dugujian. Most sword cultivators revealed ferocity externally. Given the situation, a cold glint flashed through Hang Chuyu's eyes as he released a golden core phenomenon as well. Shoo, shoo, shoo. Sword chi streaked through the air at an extremely fast speed, leaving sword scars through the void in its wake. The void seemed to be sliced into tiny blocks. It was the legacy phenomenon of Sword Sect, startling sword chi. Both phenomenons of the Sword Tao were extremely sharp and sliced the surrounding spirit energy into tiny pieces. Without the two of them controlling things intentionally, the two sword phenomenons showed signs of competing against one another. Sword cultivators specialized in cultivating their ferocities. When two sword cultivators clashed, a victor must be decided. Hang Chuyu and Dugujian supported their golden core phenomenons and dashed towards the 100-stone step. Immediately after, Su Cheng of Zephyr Thunder Palace released his golden core phenomenon as well. One after another, streaks of lightning surged above his head and formed a bedazzling sea of lightning behind him. 5 divine thunderbolts shrouded around his head and protected him. Apocalyptic 5 thunders. Corpse Mountain. Rin Tu of Azura sect pointed forward with a cold gaze. Before him, a series of corpses with a foul stench appeared endlessly. They stacked onto one another messily and created a massive mountain. Rin Tu stepped on the corpse mountain emotionlessly and continued ascending. I heard that the corpse mountain of that golden core phenomenon is made from people that died in the hands of Rin Tu. Ah! A cultivator exclaimed and chills ran down his body as he said with a trembling voice, "There's got to be millions of people there, right?" Rin Tu's voice sounded again before he could finish. Blood sea. Splash. The blood that seeped out from beneath the corpse mountain grew and transformed into a boundless sea in the blink of an eye. The sea was blood-colored and gave off a cruel aura of despair and death. The corpse mountain floated in the sea of blood. Rin Tu stood on top of the corpse mountain with a torrential ferocity as he crossed the 100th step directly and continued ahead. It's the corpse mountain blood sea. To think that Rin Tu would fuse them together. I recall that the previous person who cultivated it to such a frightening level was an expert from Azura sect 1,000 years ago, and he's this generation's Azura. In reality, Corpse Mountain and Blood Sea were two ancient phenomenons that were ranked extremely high in the phenomenon ranking. Their might became even more frightening when they were combined as one. 1,000 years ago, the Azura Yen Beichen ascended to the top of the Myriad phenomenon peak with his Corpse Mountain Blood Sea and took the #1 position. All 8 of them are rare peerless paragons. Perfected Lord Luo Shui sighed gently. Any one of them could easily take the top spot in previous Golden Core phenomenon rankings. To think that all of them would be gathered together in this generation. Furthermore, there's an almost invincible monster incarnate above all of them. Dean. Bang, bang, bang. Monk Ju Qin, Pang Yu and Monk Jian Kong released their Golden Core phenomenons one after another as well. A golden light descended. Monk Ju Qin seemed to be veiled by a golden shade and shone brightly. A 7-floor pagoda descended with a blinding brilliance and hovered above Monk Jian Kong. It poured down with a divine light like a waterfall that protected him. The legacy phenomenon of Hollow Monastery, 7-floor pagoda. The Golden Core phenomenons were turning increasingly frightening. Compared to Long River Sunset and Galaxy Vortex from earlier, they were at a whole different level in strength. Countless gazes were fixed on Ming Zhen. He was the only one who had not released his golden core phenomenon among the 8 people. Fu. Monk Yuan Kong sneered, "It's probably because he's got some worthless golden core phenomenon that's useless even if he releases it. That's why he's choosing to force himself through everything." Before he could finish his sentence, Ming Zhen conjured a hand seal with both hands and released an extremely terrifying aura. Immediately after, a green lotus appeared behind him and hovered in midair before swiveling slowly. Each petal was etched with obscure and complicated patterns. Slowly the petals opened up and the green lotus blossomed. One after another, mysterious lights spread and shone. A fragrance wafted out from the center of the lotus platform. The green lotus blossomed as though it could purify all the evil in this world. The moment the green lotus blossomed, be it the Corpse Mountain Blood Sea or the 7th-floor pagoda, the golden core phenomenons of the other 7 people shuddered for a brief moment as though they were impacted significantly. What is that phenomenon? That phenomenon looks a little familiar, I seem to have heard of it somewhere. Ah. Suddenly, a few exclamations sounded one after another above the clouds. The few perfected lords of the Buddhist monasteries bolted upright in shock as they glared at the green lotus behind Ming Zhen with disbelief in their eyes. World-cleansing green lotus. Slowly Monk Yuan Kong uttered 4 words. The crowd was in an uproar. World-cleansing green lotus, the legacy phenomenon of Fa Hua Monastery, was a top-tier golden core phenomenon of the Buddhist monasteries. When cultivated to its peak, its might was even above the 7th-floor pagoda. Chapter 736, Untitled. Chapter 736, Untitled. That phenomenon was the legacy phenomenon of Fa Hua Monastery, a super sect that was destroyed 10,000 years ago. It could only be comprehended by cultivating the number 1 secret classic of the Golden Core realm, the Mystic Dharmic Lotus Sutra. However, the Mystic Dharmic Lotus Sutra was lost for a long time in that catastrophe 10,000 years ago. In that catastrophe 10,000 years ago, Fa Hua and Daming monasteries were destroyed and countless cultivation techniques and secret skills were lost. Even after all these years, there were still cultivators searching for those cultivation techniques and secret skills. Nobody expected this unknown young monk to cultivate a golden core phenomenon that had been lost for 10,000 years. There was a high probability that this young monk had a deep relationship with the destroyed Fa Hua Monastery. Monk Yuan Kong, Monk Wei Fu and everyone else looked at Ming Zhen with a glint in their eyes, resembling hungry ferocious beasts that caught sight of a prey. Monk Yin Lu frowned slightly with a worried expression. A man's wealth was his own ruin by causing another's greed. By releasing the world-cleansing green lotus, Ming Zhen was exposing himself to the greed of others. As the 8 people of the first group released their golden core phenomenons, the distance between them increased and gradually, there was a distinction between them. Ren Tu of Azura sect was right at the front. He was already at the 105th stone step. That was a rather formidable height. In the previous golden core phenomenon ranking, Diyin, who was number 1, merely made it to the 99th stone step. The fact that Ren Tu was able to reach that height meant that his strength was stronger than Diyin 100 years ago. Alas, Diyin suppressed his cultivation for 100 years and continued comprehending the power of the Golden Core realm. The reason for his return was to become the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking once more and suppress all other paragons. Ah! Ren Tu roared into the skies and his blood chi surged. Green veins appeared on his neck like spirit snakes and he had a menacing expression of indignance. He wanted to ascend to the peak of the mountain. He was indignant. He did not wish to be inferior to others. However, the pressure from the peak was way too terrifying. Even climbing another stone step was almost impossible for him, let alone ascending to the peak. Diyin stood high and above with his hands behind his back. He gazed at the struggling Ren Tu with a faint ridicule in his eyes. One of them was screaming from the depths of his heart. The other was indifferent. One stood below. The other was at the peak of the mountain. The difference was glaring. It was the same below for Su Cheng of Zephyr Thunder Palace, Monk Jian Kong, Pang Yu and the others. It was like an emperor looking down at the masses from the top. It did not matter how the masses struggled, none of them could take down his dominance. A series of sighs came from the crowd. It had to be said that for those paragons, it was a tragedy that they were born in the same generation as Diyin. Gradually Ren 2 lowered his head. He was already exhausted. His limit was at the 105th stone step. Although the difference between him and the peak was only 3 stone steps, the distance between them was almost equivalent to the gap between heaven and earth. All of a sudden, exclamations sounded from the crowd beneath. The stone step that Ren 2 stood on quaked heavily for a brief moment. Ren 2 glanced sideways and the killing intent in his eyes surged. Not far from him, Su Cheng of Zephyr Thunder Palace had managed to arrive at the 105th stone step as well using his apocalyptic 5 thunders. Su Cheng panted heavily and was drenched in sweat. A stir broke out amongst the crowd. This meant that the 2 paragons would clash in the upcoming ranking battle. Finally, there would be a showdown between the Corpse Mountain Blood Sea and Apocalyptic 5 Thunders. Hee. Ren 2 let out an unsettling laughter that sent shivers down one's spine. Su Cheng merely smirked coldly against Ren 2's killing intent without any fear. At their level, none of them would back off from a battle unless it was against an unstoppable opponent like Diin. Ren 2 wanted to kill Su Cheng. Su Cheng wanted to furnish his reputation by suppressing Ren 2. Beneath Ren 2 and Su Cheng was monk Jian Kong of Hollow Monastery. 104th stone step. That was monk Jian Kong's limits. He gazed up at Ren 2 and Su Cheng above him with a boundless indignance in his eyes. Before he entered the ancient battlefield, he wanted to challenge Diin. When Diin ascended the peak earlier on, he realized the difference between them. However, he felt that he was definitely within the top 3 of the phenomenon ranking. To think that he could only be satisfied with the 4th spot right now. Hurry, look. There's going to be another massive battle. Interesting, it's going to be a fight between the Buddhist monasteries. A clamor broke out from the crowd again. Monk Jian Kong turned over instinctively. Another person had appeared on the 104th stone step. It was the young monk called Ming Zhen. A blossomed green lotus hovered behind Ming Zhen. It looked extremely ordinary, but it gave off a frightening aura. Monk Jian Kong's pupils constricted. He was not bothered about this young monk prior to this. But now, it seemed like his 4th spot on the phenomenon ranking was not confirmed just yet. Ming Zhen did not even glance at monk Jian Kong, merely looking up at the 105th stone step with a calm expression. His foot lingered for a moment before he continued forward. What's he doing? Is he trying to get to the next stone step? There's no wonder why that's the #1 mystic classic of the Golden Core realm. Many cultivators were dumbstruck when they noticed Ming Zhen's actions. However, Ming Zhen merely ascended half the distance to the next stone step when he swayed and grunted before landing back on the 104th stone step again. Fu. Monk Jian Kong could not help but sneer, "You overestimate yourself." Ming Zhen clutched his chest and blood oozed out from the corner of his lips. He merely glanced at monk Jian Kong but did not argue. Monk Yin Lu sighed gently. Humph. Perfected Lord Luo Shui glared at monk Yuan Kong and said coldly, if someone had not injured this young monk earlier on by abusing his seniority, he might have already ascended to the 105th stone step. Many cultivators had a sudden recollection. Prior to the fight for the phenomenon ranking, monk Yuan Kong used Sanskrit to injure Ming Zhen. Ming Zhen had ascended the Myriad phenomenon peak with an injury. 2 people stood on the 103th stone step beneath monk Jian Kong and Ming Zhen as well. Hang Qiuyu of Sword Sect and Dugu Jian of the Dugu clan. The 2 great sword cultivators were going to duke it out. This fight for the phenomenon ranking was way more intense than anyone had imagined. There were already 3 fights alone for the ranking battle of the top 10 spots. This was rare in previous phenomenon rankings. After the 2 of them came Pang Yu of Overlord Palace on the 102nd step. On the 101st stone step was monk Ju Qin of Diamond Monastery. All 8 people of the first group had made it past the 100th stone step. The fight for the phenomenon ranking this time round sure is unusually intense. To think that there are so many paragons gathered. Hey, it's time to place your bets. There's no doubt about who is at the top of the phenomenon ranking. Let's guess who will be the 2nd, 4th and... Before that cultivator completed his sentence, his gaze swept and froze on the Myriad phenomenon peak while his mouth fell agape gradually. What's wrong? Some cultivators asked as they turned towards that person's gaze. We seem to have forgotten about someone. That cultivator could not contain the shock in his eyes. On the Myriad phenomenon peak, A figure was ascending rapidly, surging into the skies, surpassing one figure after another. 90th stone step. 91st stone step. 98th stone step. Even after the 100th stone step, the figure's speed did not show any signs of diminishing and was still advancing forward. Chapter 737, Peak. Chapter 737, Peak. That person sure is terrifying. He did not release his golden core phenomenon for the first 100 steps and charged through them merely relying on his physique. It's said that his physique is comparable to a pure-blooded ferocious beast. Indeed, nothing was exaggerated at all. That's nothing much. Dean only released his golden core phenomenon after the 100th stone step as well. At that moment, countless gazes were fixed on that green figure on the Myriad phenomenon peak. As everyone discussed, Su Zimo had already stepped foot on the 100th stone step. Boom. The moment he landed on that stone step, Su Zimo's eyes shone brightly as he gave a slight frown. The pressure that came from above had increased significantly after the 100th stone step. Even with his physique he was feeling the strain. Of course that was because he did not use the power of his inner core. Su Zimo estimated that if he used the power of his inner core and burst forth with the full strength of his blood chi, he could reach the peak of the Myriad phenomenon peak even without releasing his golden core phenomenon. Of course that was impractical. Perfected Lord Yu Jun warned him that using the power of his inner core on the Myriad phenomenon peak would be courting death. Crack, crack, crack. The skies above Su Zimo's head tore repeatedly and lightning flashed. A heavy downpour rained down, turning into a torrential flood with endless meteors. It was as though the apocalypse had descended. Boom, 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 boom. 4 gigantic heavenly piercing stone pillars stood in the floods. At the top of the stone pillars was a shell that covered the skies, etched with mysterious patterns that seemed like they contained endless secrets of the universe. The 4 limbs suppressed the raging tides and the shell supported the broken skies. The primordial divine turtle had descended, rearing its head into a wild howl and a bright gaze. This was the first time that most of the cultivators present witnessed that phenomenon personally. Their expressions changed and endless shock filled their eyes. That primordial phenomenon had been lost for a long time. Even the 17 nascent souls present had not witnessed it personally before. There's no wonder why it's a primordial divine being that protected the masses. To think that it would possess such a might. Monk Yin Lu lamented. Perfected Lord Luo Shui said deeply, the human race will definitely prosper with the resurgence of these lost primordial phenomenons. Perfected Lord Hun Yi and Monk Yuan Kong merely smirked coldly with nonchalance. Although Perfected Lord Yu Jun was expressionless, there was a hint of worry in his eyes. While the appearance of a primordial phenomenon represented the arrival of a golden era, it could also imply that an unimaginable catastrophe was approaching. If the human race could tide through it, they would prosper. If they could not, there was a high chance they would be annihilated. In the ancient era, multiple emperors rose and a supreme peerless existence that was feared throughout history such as the human emperor surfaced. Those were the reasons that built the current state of Tianhuang mainland. But now that the emperors have passed on and the human emperor left Tianhuang mainland a long time alone, who was going to save the human race if a catastrophe truly arrived? I might be worrying for nothing. Perfected Lord Yu Jun shook his head and smiled deprecatingly. The pressure on Su Zimo diminished significantly after he released the primordial divine turtle. He arrived at the 101st stone step and surpassed Monk Juchen without pausing to continue ahead. 102nd step. 103rd step. Monk Juchen, Pang Yu and Hang Qiuyu could only watch as Su Zimo passed them by. The 3 of them had conflicted expressions. In the battle beneath the human emperor's palace 20 years ago, the paragons of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects were left dead and injured. Most of them were despondent from the setback and relegated to be a part of the masses. The 3 of them were the only ones that overcame their inner demons and stood up again. They advanced honorably and regained their spots as the number 1 disciples of their sects in the Golden Core realm. A large part of the reason for their return was to erase the shame from their past. They wanted to fight Su Zimo again. However, Su Zimo did not give them that chance at all. He surpassed them with ease on the Myriad phenomenon peak. Everyone knew that Su Zimo had a double phenomenon. Now that he was already here with a single phenomenon, where could he advance with two of them? Could he truly match Diyin? Gradually, silence filled the vicinity of the Myriad phenomenon peak. All the cultivators wanted to know where Su Zimo could reach. Diyin stood at the top and glared down at Su Zimo expressionlessly. Bang! Su Zimo had ascended to the 105th stone step. Su Cheng was emotional as he glared at Su Zimo sternly with widened eyes. Dozens of days ago he fought against Su Zimo. At that time, Su Zimo released a double phenomenon and fused them together to crush his apocalyptic five thunders. And now he was already at this level with just a single golden core phenomenon. This meant that the power of Su Zimo's golden core phenomenon had grown to yet another level within these dozens of days. Su Cheng's guess was both correct and incorrect. It was true that the power of Su Zimo's golden core phenomenon had grown. However, it was not during these dozens of days, but on his journey of ascending the Myriad phenomenon peak earlier on. He comprehended the marks and auras left behind by ancient experts on the Myriad phenomenon peak and gained insight into the Daos of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects from the Qi condensation, foundation establishment and golden core realm. His golden core phenomenon had evolved completely. While outsiders might not be able to sense it, Su Zimo understood that change the greatest. He stood on the 105th stone step and lingered for a moment with closed eyes. All of a sudden, Su Zimo opened his eyes and roared into the skies. His golden core swiveled and a scorching heat wave was released. Bang! Boom! Boom! The mountains toppled and volcanoes spewed. Scarlet lava blanketed the floor and flames blazed for thousands of kilometers. A gigantic anaconda tunneled out from underground and soared into the skies, flapping its wings that were burned scarlet and almost transparent as it reared its head into a roar. The primordial soaring serpent. Two primordial phenomenons had descended. Su Zimo's aura exploded and he stomped on the ground heavily, soaring into the skies like an arrow as he crossed the 106th, 107th steps. Boom. In one go. Su Zimo ascended to the peak of the Myriad phenomenon peak in one go, relying on his double phenomenon. After a momentary silence, the crowd broke into exclamations. Everything happened too quickly that many cultivators had yet to react to it. In the blink of an eye, there was another person at the peak of the Myriad phenomenon peak. The mountain was 108,000 feet tall and clouds floated around it. Two figures stood among them, faintly visible and resembling peerless emperors that looked down on the mortal realm. Many cultivators looked extremely excited. Two people on the mountain peak implied that there was going to be an earth-shaking fight between them in the ranking battle. Heis. Perfected Lord Yujun sighed. This was the outcome he was most reluctant to witness as a cultivator of Enigma Palace hosting the phenomenon ranking. The loss of either of these two peerless paragons would not benefit the human race. At the peak, Dean gazed at Su Zimo, who was beside him, and smirked with a fake smile. Take a good look at this picturesque scenery, this wonderful world and the beautiful skies. Enjoy the look of reverence from the other cultivators. This might be the last things you can ever enjoy. Is that so? Su Zimo replied with an indifferent expression. Su Zimo, you are truly ignorant. Do you know what this peak of the Myriad phenomenon peak means for you? Dean pointed below his feet and gave an unsettling smile. This is your death's gate. By ascending this peak, you've crossed the gates of death. Since you have a death wish, all I can do is fulfill that for you. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.